転生
What if Naruto was Starborn Silence, the mercenary shinobi? Caterpillar by Grumpy Wolf. Chapter 2. Why have you gathered us all here today, Batman? Green Lantern asked. It was only a few minutes after Flash, Green Lantern and Martian Manhunter sabotaged the International Space Station. To prevent anyone from getting their hands on that powerful railgun, they blew up the whole satellite. Everyone else on board, the astronauts and Cosnia's agents too, was taken out and brought to the watchtower thanks to Green Lantern's power ring. But it was only temporary. They had to take them back to Earth. All the members of the Justice League were gathered in the conference room, except for Wonder Woman. The rest were looking at Batman, waiting for an explanation. Do you remember that alien mercenary that rescued Superman half a year ago? He's back. He came back to Earth and our watchtower's radar couldn't detect it all. So that was the big emergency. Hawkgirl scoffed. Last time we met him, he wasn't a psychopath. He saved Superman's life. Appearances can be deceiving. He's dangerous. He put me under an illusion and I didn't even know it until he lifted the spell himself. While Wonder Woman was imprisoned and I was under that illusion, he broke into Vandal Savage's control room and cut off his head. A momentary silence descended. In their memories, the alien mercenary and his talking fox did not strike them as the cold-blooded killer type. If anything, he seemed like a decent person at heart because he had gone out of his way to save Superman and Supergirl. It was Green Lantern that broke the silence. As far as I'm concerned, good riddance. Seeing the way everyone was looking at him, he said. That madman poisoned the king of a country, destroyed 3 U.S. Navy ships killing almost everyone on board and then tried to start World War III. I'll say it again, good riddance. Not to mention what he did in World War II too. When presented with the hard facts nobody could retort against his words. Vandal Savage was one of the worst scourges of the earth. Batman narrowed his eyes as he spoke. This guy is a mercenary. He'll do whatever he's paid for. What if his target was the US president instead of Vandal Savage? What could we have done to stop him when we can't even detect him? At his words, everyone finally realized the gravity of the situation, what Batman was worried about. We've banded together and created the Justice League after Imperium nearly took over our planet almost 1 year ago. Our purpose, as the Justice League, was primarily to defend against alien threats. If we can't do that, what is the Justice League needed for anymore? We don't need to work together just to keep in check the criminals with superpowers. We've been doing that just fine, solo, long before the Justice League was formed. Superman nodded and said in support of his words. Batman is right. We're not the only ones who took the responsibility of protecting the innocent. Almost every large city has its own local hero or group of heroes that protect it, just like us. As the Justice League, we must not forget about our purpose. As they started to discuss how to improve Earth's defenses against external threats, an alarm started to blare from the watchtower's control room. Flash was the first to arrive and see the reason. An enormous alien ship could be seen heading towards Earth at a very high speed. Asterism. Even after all these years, I can't see what you like so much about ramen. The taste is nothing special and there is so little meat. We're also in the middle of a job, aren't we? Kyuubi's voice sounded in Naruto's earpiece. Naruto brought the bowl of ramen to his mouth and drank all the remaining soup in one breath. Shut up. When was the last time I had ramen? Half a year ago. 6 months. Suddenly, a very loud growling sound almost made Naruto go deaf in one ear. Oi, Kurama, the hell was that? What are you doing? Hee, just a stupid bear that didn't know its place. I'm going to eat roasted bear now. Talk to you later. Kyuubi said and then cut off his transmission. Good grief, Naruto said and chuckled at Kyuubi's antics. After capturing Vandal Savage, Naruto did not immediately leave the Earth. Earth was one of the very few planets where people cooked ramen and he had not eaten any in half a year, since the last time he came to Earth. Naturally, he would not pass on the opportunity to have some again. But Kyuubi did not tag along with him this time around and chose instead to wander through the Balkan Mountains, where Cosnia was located, in the meantime, having some fun of his own. As for Naruto, he flew halfway across the planet, from southeastern Europe to the northeastern coast of the American continent, to Boston City, where he had eaten ramen the last time. While the Justice League was having a very serious discussion concerning the danger that Naruto posed, the man in question was in a world of happiness as mountains of empty bowls of ramen piled up on his table. Since it was early morning on the eastern coast of America at that moment, there were other customers besides him in the restaurant too. His outrageous eating immediately became the focus of their attention. Wearing a mask while eating did not do him any favors either. Some crazy alien crashed on Earth again. Hey, Russell, turn up the volume, one of the customers asked the clerk behind the counter. It looked like the customer in question was a regular because the clerk listened to his request and turned up the volume on the TV hanging above the counter. Naruto threw a passing glance at the screen, but he immediately focused his full attention on it when he saw the contents of the news report. An alien object crashed in the center of Jump City just 10 minutes ago. The sole survivor of the crash appears to be a young woman in her late teens, but it became clear that she was not human when she spoke in an alien language and started smashing the walls of the surrounding buildings with her hands. Charles Rock is at the scene with more information. As the news anchor spoke, a live footage started playing. But when Naruto saw who that alien was, he said slowly, "No fucking way." He tapped quickly on his wristwatch and a hologram appeared from it. It was the 3D image of a young woman in her late teens with golden-colored skin, long, wavy red hair, and bright green eyes. Void, what are the chances? The girl in the hologram coming from his wristwatch was the very same person as the berserk alien on the news report. It was none other than Coriander, the princess of Tamarin whom Naruto was supposed to rescue from the Scions. Asterism. An Almaration warship was flying at the fastest speed it was capable of in Earth's atmosphere. The moment Naruto realized that the alien that had crashed into Jump City was his bounty, he ditched his ramen in a heartbeat and teleported back to his ship. To cover the distance between Boston and Jump City, Earth's commercial aeroplanes would need to fly for a few good hours. One city was on the east coast while the other one was on the west coast of the USA. In contrast, it took him only a few minutes. However, despite his speedy arrival, by the time he got there, the central district was already trashed as if it had gone through a war. Destroyed buildings, burning cars, cracked streets, and civilians running away in panic. In the middle of all that destruction, the Tamarian princess was shooting energy bolts from her cuffed hands while screaming in an alien language. Opposite of her, three peculiar teenagers were running and dodging as though their very lives were on the line, and that was the actual case. In her desperation and rage, Coriander was shooting energy blasts everywhere around her. "That was super close," a green-skinned boy wearing a helmet said while panting. "Girl is gonna wreck the whole city." Another one of them said. It was a very buff young man dressed in casual clothes and a hoodie covering his head. Going by the red glow in his left eye, it seemed like he was not entirely human. "I won't let her. I won't lose this fight," the third one said. It was a black-haired boy dressed in a green and red costume. A thin black mask covered his eyes. The three of them were none other than Robin, Beast Boy and Cyborg. At Robin's words, they jumped away from the bus behind which they had taken cover and rushed at the alien girl who had fallen to her knees in exhaustion. But their sight suddenly turned ashen black and they stopped in their tracks. "Maybe fighting isn't the answer," a girl said as she walked out of a side alley. Her entire body was covered by a hooded purple cloak. Further talk among the 14 stopped, however, when someone dropped from the sky almost like a meteorite and the entire street was shaken by the powerful tremor. "Who are you?" Robin shouted and grabbed a berdrang from his utility belt. It looked like the newcomer did not hear him because he started walking towards the kneeling girl without sparing the other for a glance. "Don't come any closer." Coriander shouted hysterically and pointed her cuffed arms at him as energy bolts formed in her hands. Unlike the teens from before, Naruto had no issues with understanding her words thanks to his high-tech translating device. "I'm not gonna hurt you. Your parents hired me to rescue you." Naruto had expected at the mention of her parents for the girl to calm down, but instead, her face became twisted in anger and she screamed as she shot two very powerful bolts of energy from her hands. Though startled, he was not caught off guard. He had been cautious from the beginning because he knew very well just how dangerous a cornered beast could be. With a stomp of his foot, the street in front of his feet rose to make a wall in front of him, just in time to block the green energy bolts. The wall was blasted to smithereens, but the girl had poured the last of her strength in that attack. Then, she collapsed back on the ground powerlessly. She no longer posed any threat. "It's all right, little girl. Just go to sleep," Naruto said and he formed a ram seal with his hands. Though Coriander was able to detect the unknown energy that invaded her body, she was too exhausted to resist it. Her eyes closed against her will and she fell on her side, succumbing to a genjutsu-induced deep sleep. It was the same technique that Kabuto had cast over the stadium where Naruto's first Chunin exams had taken place when he was a young genin. That is to say that it was an area of effect technique. The alien princess was not the only one to be forced into a deep sleep, but two of the three boys on the sidelines also fell on the ground asleep, with Beast Boy even snoring out loud. The only ones who could hold their composure and resist the genjutsu were the cloaked girl, Raven, and Cyborg, due to him being half robot. Over the past century, Naruto had never stopped training his taijutsu, ninjutsu and genjutsu, the three main arts of a shinobi. He had achieved an impressive feat in his ninjutsu due to his shadow clones. He had mastered all 5 nature transformations and even the yin and yang releases. His taijutsu had become flawless as well. Due to knowing that if he found a way back home he would have to fight against the rabbit goddess, Naruto had never slacked in his training. But genjutsu had never been his strong point. He had no talent in that area and hard work could only take one so far. Although he became proficient enough with it to fool the senses of regular people, those with decent magic resistance and any half-decent magic user could resist his genjutsu without problems. In that regard, the aforementioned girl, Raven, was more than half-decent when it came to magic. Black light appeared around Raven's hands and her eyes glowed beneath her hood. Cyborg's hand transformed into a cannon too as he shouted, "What did you do to them?" But Naruto did not have time to reply because a beam of red light blew up the place in front of his feet. It was a warning shot, coming from none other than Superman. And he was not alone. Alongside him were also Flash, Batman and Hawkgirl. As for the ship that the Watchtower had detected, it was the Gordonian ship from which Coriander had broken out. Green Lantern, Martian Manhunter and Wonder Woman were investigating it at that moment. Now, he was surrounded from all sides by the 4 members of the Justice League and 2 of the local heroes of Jump City. "Do not move," Superman demanded. Naruto frowned behind his mask. "Why did you come back to Earth? And why did you kill Vandal Savage?" "Gee, Superman, why would a mercenary capture someone? Maybe because someone paid me to." Superman frowned at his sarcasm. "Why are y'all even mad? I got rid of a mass murderer for you, for free. For all I know, you should be grateful. No lengthy trials, no chance for him to buy his way out with bribes and good lawyers, and no chance for him to escape prison again either. He's finished." "That's not how things work on Earth," Batman retorted. "No one has the right to take the law in their hands and kill." Naruto let out a drawn-out sigh. Whatever you say. I'm not in the mood for polemics. Look, I'll just get my bounty and be out of here." Then, under their eyes, he bent down, grabbed the sleeping princess from the ground and put her on his wide shoulder. "Put the girl down," Superman ordered as he started making steps towards him. "She's my bounty. And she's not an Earthling. This has nothing to do with you," Naruto said calmly, trying to reason with them. However, in the next moment, a red blur rushed at him from behind at the speed of sound. But with a light stomp of his foot, dangerous-looking spikes burst from the ground, almost impaling the attacker. The speedster was forced to jump high up in the air at the very last moment and abandon his attacking attempt. A clone appeared next to Naruto and grabbed the princess from his shoulder. Then, he turned towards the heroes surrounding him and warned. "I'm saying it one last time. This has nothing to do with you. Back off before things get ugly. I don't want to hurt you." Generally, Naruto tried to not get into altercations with good-natured people. He did not want to kill or maim people that did not deserve it. However, because he was not bound by their tight morals, once in a while, scenes like the current one still took place. "Oh, I don't know who'll get hurt in the end," Hawkgirl said, and her mace shone menacingly with electricity. "I suggest you let go of that girl and hand over Vandal Savage's remains too. After that, we won't stop you from leaving. You can leave the Earth and never come back," Batman said. Naruto no longer spoke. He prepared for fighting. Naturally, in normal conditions, he could have just teleported back to his ship and then be on his way. But with Coriander in his custody, things were different. He was more than capable of teleporting her alongside him, but the problem came after that. He did not know for how long the genjutsu that he had placed on her would last. His skill with genjutsu was unreliable. "If she wakes up in my ship and starts throwing around her energy bolts, my ship will be toasted." Initially, he had intended to explain the Tamarinine princess the situation and make her come willingly. But that idea flew out of the window with the Justice League's appearance. Of course, he also had another option, to beat the crap out of the girl until she became physically unable to even move, but Naruto was not the kind to raise his hands against innocents. Especially since his mission was supposed to be about rescuing and protecting her, not breaking her arms and legs. But just then, a huge hologram appeared in the sky. It was the image of a muscular humanoid lizard with red eyes and metallic wings. It was a Gordonian. A sonorous voice reverberated through the entire city. People of Earth, we come to your planet to hunt down an escaped prisoner. A very dangerous prisoner. Do not interfere and we will leave your city with minimum damage. But if you attempt to assist her, your destruction will be absolute. Just as the Gordonian's words ended, Martian Manhunter's voice sounded in Batman's earpiece. Batman, the Gordonians on the ship do not want to negotiate. We cannot approach them easily either. They have their weapons aimed at us. True to the Martian's words, only a few moments later, a swarm of flying Gordonians appeared in the sky above Jump City. There were almost 100 of them. Gordonians. Why are they here? The words came out of Hawkgirl's mouth. Originally, she was more than ready to start brawling against the masked alien mercenary, but the moment the immense hologram of the Gordonian ship's commander appeared in the sky, she immediately changed her mind. She was not the only one either. Green Lantern was of the same mind as well. Though the Gordonian Intergalactic Empire was from outside the 3,600 space sectors regulated by the Green Lantern Corps, most of the Green Lanterns were aware of their evil deeds. Superman, we are focusing on the wrong guy. Green Lantern transmitted through his earpiece. He was currently flying very high up in the air, in front of the Gordonian ship together with Martian Manhunter and Wonder Woman. I've heard about the Gordonians before. There. Hawkgirl cut him in the middle and continued his words. An intergalactic empire hell-bent on conquering and enslaving the galaxy. My people, the Thanagarians, have been at war against them for generations. They're the worst scum of the universe, pieces of trash that conquer planets and sell their inhabitants as slaves. Her voice was quivering with anger. The hate in her voice could not be faked. Her hatred for Gordonians had been ingrained in her since she was a frail child. They were her race's archenemy. It did not take a genius to realize that the alien girl was an escaped slave from one of the worlds enslaved by the Gordonians. They also reached the conclusion that the mercenary had no intention to harm her given that he had not attacked her and had only put her to sleep. Nevertheless, Naruto had no way of knowing what the Justice League was talking about amongst themselves. When Superman got within a 25-foot-long distance from him, he thought that they were finally going to attack him. I've warned you, boy. I gave you a chance to back away. You only have yourself to blame. He spoke coldly. Wait, Superman began to say. He wanted to momentarily cease their hostilities in order to deal with the Gordonians' attack first, but his change of heart had come a little too late. The masked mercenary spread his feet in a wider stance and his legs bent slightly from the knees. Then, he slapped his hands together like in prayer and his fur-collared black cloak began to float and billow despite the absence of any wind, revealing the combat suit he was wearing underneath. A terrible aura started to ooze out of his body and a great feeling of danger assaulted Superman's sharp senses. But he was left with no room to react at all before he found himself losing his equilibrium and getting slammed against the ground. He was not the only one. On a radius of 600 feet around the praying Naruto, all living beings fell flat on their face against the ground. Only a few moments later, the nearly 100 Gordonians that had been flying in the air before were smashed against the ground too, cracking the streets with their bodies and splattering the surrounding cars and buildings with their blood. Fortunately, there were no civilians around as they had evacuated the entire district from the moment that Coriander had started to crazily blow up everything around her. But the ones present at the scene, the Gordonians, the Justice League and the 4 local heroes of Jump City, were not as lucky. What is this? Flash said as he tried to push against the ground with his hands, but he fell back with a thud that almost knocked him out cold. He was finding it hard to even breathe. An invisible force was pulling at his internal organs and his blood was churning. Hawkgirl was similarly flat against the rooftop of a building. Her superior Thanagarian constitution made it easier for her to bear with it than someone like Flash, but she could still not move even an inch from where she stood. As for Batman, he was on the brink of death, barely holding onto his consciousness. It was gravity. With Naruto as the center, in a circle of 600 feet in diameter, Earth's gravity was multiplied several times over. It was the peak of mastery that Naruto had reached in the Earth release and the Six Paths Sage mode. Every living being in that area was flat on their belly or back, struggling to cope with the force that threatened to end their lives. The Tamarinine princess, Robin, and Beast Boy had been shaken out of their genjutsu-induced sleep, but they were similarly helpless, especially Robin, who was in the same situation as his former mentor. The only one able to rise up from the ground was Superman. His immense strength as a Kryptonian was clearly living up to its fame. If this goes on, everyone will die. We were in the wrong. Please stop. Superman said, his breathing erratic. The nearly 100 armed Gordonians that had flown down to Earth were all dead already, their smashed and bloodied corpses creating a macabre paysage. The cloaked girl, Raven, had encased herself in a sphere of pure darkness and was probably still fine as she sat on the ground. Beast Boy had turned himself into a tiny flea to decrease the effect of gravity on his body as much as possible, and Hawkgirl was in no immediate danger either, just immobilized. But Flash and Cyborg were starting to have serious difficulties while Batman and Robin were on the verge of dying. Though he was very annoyed at the Earthlings' nosiness, Naruto had never intended to kill them. That's why he had chosen to immobilize them instead of throwing any deadly techniques at them. Therefore, when he heard Superman's offering of peace, his hands that were stuck to each other in a prayer parted. Like a miracle, the terrible pulling force stopped. Although the Justice League and the heroes of Jump City were now free to move again, nobody dared to resume their previous hostility. But their collective relief was almost palpable. However, when they thought that it was finally over, a haze of red and gold light began to pour out of Naruto's body. From his legs to his waist and up to his chest before finally enveloping his head too, almost like a cocoon. Bathed in gold and crimson red light, he appeared like a miniature sun in the darkness of the night. 1. Asterism. The entire process took only 1 second, but to the onlookers, it felt as though it was much longer. Then, the cocoon of light blasted outwards and a tremendous aura of power flooded the entire sky, and not only. At that moment, regardless of what place on the planet they were, the magic users highly attuned to the flow of magic sensed the disturbance. Inside a high-class restaurant in London, UK, a blonde man was having dinner with a very wealthy-looking man. He was in the process of promoting a brand new sleeping pill, self-created pills charmed to produce a magically induced sleep, when he suddenly jumped up to his feet, almost flipping the table and greatly startling his dining partner and potential customer. In a lone tower outside of Salem, Massachusetts, a grizzled-haired man was having breakfast with his wife when he suddenly shivered and spilt the cup of coffee he had been drinking. In Napoli, Italy, a beautiful illusionist botched a magic trick that she was performing on the stage when she momentarily lost her focus, and instead of taking a rabbit out of her magic hat, she took out a snake, making the entire audience cry out in panic. On the island of Paradise, the queen of the Amazons, Hippolyta, was startled awake from her meditation, and her devotion time to the gods was interrupted. Great Athena, protect her. She prayed, her heart filled with worry at the thought of her daughter. Asterism. Enveloped in a mix of crimson red and golden chakra, his feet left the surface of the street as he started to slowly float. Behind his back, 10 pitch-black orbs came into existence, and with their apparition, a heavy pressure descended. It was not a physical force or something that could be seen or explained with science. It was the coercion that a superior existence could exert on the beings on a lower evolutionary scale. While the metahumans present at the scene were not too drastically affected, the regular humans several tens of miles around were overwhelmed by a feeling of fear. Even before the rabbit goddess had thrown him into a dimensional portal, Naruto had been able to enter the Six Paths Sage mode and combine it with his tailed beast mode. However, after almost a century, his mastery over it grew to the point where it could rival that of his ancestor, the Sage of the Six Paths himself. With a red and yellow flash, his body disappeared. An instant later, he was 3 miles high up in the air, above Jump City, right in front of a galleon-class Gordonian ship. It was not the small type of ship that the Gordonian slavers used normally. It was much larger, almost half a mile long, with a crew numbering in the hundreds. It showed how much importance the Princess of Tamarin held for the Scions, since the Gordonians were nothing more, nothing less than the Scion monarchy's attack dogs. In front of such an enormous spaceship, Naruto looked like an ant. But the moment he appeared floating in the sky, the warship's tens of guns and cannons were trained on him. Even the largest particle cannon at the bow of the spaceship, a cannon capable of even blowing up smaller moons, started to glow and flicker, a sign of it being charged to fire. A hail of laser beams was shot at him, but he seemed as calm and collected as ever. With a wave of his hand, one of the truth-seeking balls behind his back flew in front of him and took the form of an enormous black shield. The laser beams did not even make a sound of impact. At the contact with the black shield, they simply vanished. The Gordonians aboard the spaceship did not even have time to express their surprise because right after the first wave of fire, Naruto flew closer to the black shield and slapped it lightly with his palm. But that light slap caused a shockwave so powerful that the sky was completely cleared of clouds in a radius of tens of miles around. Similarly, Martian Manhunter and Wonder Woman, who had been watching the unfolding events with a blank look on their faces, were also blasted to thousands of feet away from the Gordonian ship's proximity. In fact, Naruto did not need to slap the shield that hard or to hit it at all. He could control it with a simple thought, with his mind. But he had done so in order to blow away the 3 members of the Justice League because he did not want for them to get killed too in the crossfire. Green Lantern managed to stabilize himself in the air the first, and he also caught his 2 teammates with his power rings constructs of green light. The 3 of them turned their heads and looked back at the Gordonian ship just in time to see the large black shield smashing against it. They had been expecting a very powerful explosion or at least another shockwave similar to the one from a few moments before. But there was none of that. The moment the black shield clashed against the Gordonian ship, it turned into a black sphere that encased the half-a-mile-long galleon-class starship within. Then, without even making a sound, the enormous sphere that had encapsulated the Gordonian ship imploded. A warship capable of even taking over a planet was turned into nothingness, just like that. After that, the now tiny orb flew back next to the other 9 truth-seeking orbs floating at his back. Jesus Christ. Great Hera. In front of a scene like that, Green Lantern and Wonder Woman could not help crying out the name of the gods they believed in. Martian Manhunter himself was mute, speechless. Down below, on the ground, the rest of the Justice League and the 4 local heroes of Jump City were no less shocked either. Although it was night, Naruto's 6 paths Biju mode glowing like a miniature sun and the ship being almost half a mile long made them see what had happened perfectly, even despite the distance. Even for Batman and Superman, 2 veterans when it came to fighting all kinds of aliens, it was the first time they had seen something as shocking as that. Until then, Batman had always thought that with enough preparation time, planning, and money, he could go against anyone. Naturally, that led to a great level of self-confidence and even a certain amount of pride being born in his heart. He, a mere human, with no superpowers, had managed to stand on equal grounds even against incredibly powerful beings such as Superman, Wonder Woman and Martian Manhunter. However, when he saw the enormous Gordonian ship being erased from existence without even leaving a scrap of metal behind, he was shaken. What could I possibly do alone against a being like that? No, what could the Justice League do against someone like him? At the same time, Batman's mind also went to the business card that Naruto had given him half a year before. Back then, he had found it weird that someone who was wearing a fox-themed mask and had a 9-tailed fox companion would have such a strange alias, Caterpillar. But now he understood. At first glance, Naruto had looked like an easy-going guy and a money grubber. A mercenary, fitting the stereotype. Ordinary and unassuming, like a caterpillar. But just like caterpillars transform into very beautiful butterflies once they come out of the cocoon and evolve, it was the same with Naruto when he revealed his true power. Asterism. Everyone watched with trepidation how the deity-like alien flew back to the ground. Though Superman tried to not show his inner emotions, a focused observer would notice how rigid his expression looked. It was even worse because Superman could feel that the alien's powers were of a magical nature, the bane of his physiology alongside kryptonite and red radiation. Nonetheless, Naruto was not interested in antagonizing them or getting back at them for trying to make things hard for him. Though he loved to joke around and act like a filled with youthfulness man, his mind was still that of an old man. In his eyes, the Justice League were nothing but a group of children that tried to pick a fight against an adult and got their butts whooped. For him, it was enough if they learned their lesson and stayed put for a while. He had no further interest in quarreling with them, and he certainly no longer cared about preaching and force-feeding his philosophy of life to other people like when was a teenager. The red and yellow energy seeped back into his body and the 10 truth-seeking balls melted into his back, joining his chakra pool too. Without saying a word to the ones around him, he headed straight towards Coriander, who was still rooted in her place despite having woken up earlier from the genjutsu he had placed on her. I've killed your captors. As I told you before, your parents hired me to rescue you. Naruto told her, and the translating device did its job to change his words into the language spoken on Tamarin. Coriander looked like she wanted to say something, but besides the trembling of her lower lip, she could not move her mouth. She was terrified. Come with me. I hope you will behave and not throw any temper tantrums. For your own good. A shaky nod was all the confirmation he needed before placing a hand on her shoulder and teleporting themselves back to his ship. Now, he did not need to physically restrain her anymore. The girl was too scared to go against his words. Asterism. I felt your power all the way from the other side of the planet. What the hell did you do? Kyuubi asked when Naruto flew back to Europe with his ship to pick him up and leave the planet. In response to that, Naruto threw up a mouthful of coagulated purple-black blood in the toilet. I hate this. Half of his face was violet and there were patches of purple and black over his hands, forearms and chest too. It was the effect of drawing the polluted natural energy of the earth when he had entered the six-path sage mode. He had drawn a rather large amount of natural energy to conjure the truth-seeking orbs and use one of them to disintegrate that enormous Gordonian ship. What was happening currently was the reason why he always avoided using his sage mode unless it was necessary on the planets inhabited by technologically advanced sentient beings. Those planets would be infected and polluted by the beings living on it. When he entered the six-path sage mode on such a planet, it was as though he was drinking poison. Now, he was facing the consequences. After he threw up a few more times, he took a quick shower and came back to the living quarters of his ship where Coriander was still waiting on the very sofa where he had left her an hour ago. She had not moved at all. But she did manage to regain some of her composure in that time frame. When she saw the masked Naruto entering the room, she asked, "What are you going to do with me?" Naruto sighed. "Look, I told you 2 times already. Your parents hired me to rescue you from the Scions. You're lying. Just tell me the truth." Coriander said, almost shouting. She looked very agitated. "You're saving her life and that's how she shows her gratitude. Ungrateful little twerp." Kyuubi growled and one of his tails elongated, about to slap the snot out of her, but Naruto put a hand on his head to stop him. "It's all right, Kurama," Naruto said. "It's not that bad, I'm fine." Clearly, Naruto was referring to the reason why Kyuubi was angry, the fact that he got seriously ill. When he looked at the poisoned visage of Naruto and then at the girl who had not even said a thank you, he wanted to beat her up good and teach her some manners. Turning his attention back to Coriander, Naruto said, "I am a man of my word. I do not lie. Not in this kind of important matters." "How are you not? My parents have been dead for years." The girl shouted, tears threatening to spill from her eyes. Naruto and Kyuubi looked at each other in doubt. "Explain." Kyuubi ordered. "It all started when the Gordonians attacked our planet. My sister had sold our planet's defense plans to the enemy. Because of her betrayal, Tamarin was conquered. In order to preserve the peace, for the sake of all the people of Tamarin, I was offered as a tribute to the Gordonians, as a slave." As she said that, Coriander's green eyes glowed with anger and hatred. "After that, my sister staged a coup and took control of Tamarin. Her men had executed the entire royal family, both my parents and my brother. Only I was left alive, sold to the Scions who tortured and experimented on me for years." Energy bolts started taking form around her hands and she looked like she was about to lose control of them in her rage, but a large tail slapped her across the face so hard that she was thrown off the sofa. Her energy bolts disappeared back into her body before they could be fired. "If you as much as damage one chair in this ship after all he went through to rescue your sorry ass, I'll eat you alive, bounty be damned. This is your one and only warning." That threat would have come out as amusing had it been the previously tiny fox that made it, but that was not the case. Instead of a tiny fox cub, there stood an enormous 9-tailed fox now, a fierce demon that cast a shadow over the entire living room with its size. Kyuubi had no lost love for humans of any kind, that's why his behavior towards Wonder Woman had been strange in Naruto's eyes. Normally, this rough and violent attitude was what he showed to other people, not to mention how angry he was at the moment because Naruto had gotten himself hurt. "Kurama. Get a hold of yourself. That's enough," Naruto said seriously. Though still pissed, Kyuubi listened to his words and reverted to his regular form. Naruto took him in his arms and then placed him on his shoulder where Kyuubi liked to sit usually. "Follow me to the control room," Naruto told the girl and she hurried to come after him. Kyuubi smacking her with his tail had reminded her that she was not in a situation where she could throw tantrums and that the man in front of her was strong enough to kill her in a heartbeat, unlike the Gordonians from whom she had managed to escape before. After taking a seat in front of the computer, he called his information broker. Come on, pick up you dirty rat, Naruto said in annoyance after the fourth unanswered call. I have a bad feeling about this, Kyuubi said. I don't know, man, Rui Nak has never tried to screw with me. He's never lied to me about job-related things. But there are only two options, either the girl is lying about her parents being dead. Or that rat bastard is lying. And I sensed that the girl was speaking the truth. Naruto shook his head. No, we can't take this as absolute. You know your negative emotion sensing can be fooled sometimes. If she truly believes that she is speaking the truth, you will not detect any lies even if what she says is not right. It could very well be that she was made to believe that her parents were killed. That sounds more likely if you think what a piece of shit her sister is and that Rui Nak has never given us a reason to doubt him. But Kyuubi was holding his position firmly. Trust me on this, Naruto. There's something fishy going on. Naruto looked at him in doubt but did not argue. Kyuubi did not say things like that often, but when he did, his instincts often proved to be spot on. As he typed on the keyboard to set the coordinates for the next space warp, towards Tamarin in the Vega system, he resolved himself to approach the rest of the mission with extra caution. What in the world? Did I put in the wrong coordinates? Naruto muttered to himself when he saw the desolate scenery outside, through the pilot cabin's window. It was a scene extremely similar to the one that he had seen half a year ago when he went to the Rouse system at the request of Superman and saved the young Argonian girl, Kara Zor-El. Countless asteroids littered the space where the planet Tamarin should have been. Computer, confirm our location, Naruto ordered. At his request, the large screen of the computer showed a very detailed map of the Milky Way galaxy, a map that proceeded to be zoomed in rapidly. It took just a few seconds for the map to be zoomed in until only a planetary system was displayed on the screen, the Vega system. On it, an inverted green triangle was blinking above the planet Tamarin. But when looking through the windows of the ship, Tamarin was nowhere to be seen. Countless chunks of rocks and a large amount of debris were all that was left of the previously flourishing planet. Although Coriander did not understand the Almeratian language that Naruto used to interact with the AI of the ship, it did not take a genius to understand what was going on when she saw their location on the map of the Vega system and the mass of asteroids outside. Tears welled up in her eyes and she started crying bitterly. From someone who had had everything, Coriander had lost everything. Initially, a princess of the royal family and the next in line to become the ruler of her planet, she was sold out by her own parents, at a very frail age, for the sake of the greater good, for peace. She became a slave and she even lost her innocence when one of the Gordonian jailers raped her. She had murdered that Gordonian in revenge later on, but the damage done to her was obviously not repaired. Instead, things only continued to spiral downwards from there. After killing her jailers and attempting to escape, the Gordonians thought of her as too dangerous and sold her to their allies, the Scion monarchy. In the following years, she endured all kinds of torture and experiments at the hands of the Scions. And now, even her homeworld had been destroyed. Coriander let herself down on her knees and sobbed in her hands. Over the course of his long life, after witnessing the death of many worlds, including the apocalypse of his own, Naruto inadvertently became detached from the world around him. He would enjoy the moment and have fun, but he always kept other people and places at arm's length, never letting anyone in his heart except for his lifelong friend, Kyuubi. However, at that moment, hearing the girl's anguished cries cracked his heart. Do you understand pain a little now? If you don't share someone's pain, you can never understand them. Even to this day, almost a century after his fateful battle against the leader of the Akatsuki, Uzumaki Nagato, Naruto could vividly remember every single moment of it, every single word of his former enemy. Nagato was the one person who had marked him the most, even more than his mentor, the Toad Sage. The older he grew, the more he realized the naivete of Jiraiya's dream and the harsh truth in Pain's words. Naruto lowered himself to Coriander's level and put his hand gently on her shoulder. I'm sorry for your loss. Her situation hit very close to home for Naruto. He may have not had it as bad as Coriander, but, just like her, he had also been sacrificed by his own father for the sake of the village, for the greater good. Betrayed by their family for the sake of peace. And just like her, he had also lost his homeworld. He understood all too well her pain. And that was why his passive attitude cracked when faced with her cries. It was just a small show of compassion on Naruto's side, but for the crying Coriander, it was the drop that spilt the glass. She lunged at him and her arms wrapped around his back tightly as she started to cry out loud in his chest. I have nothing left, nothing. Coriander said through her tears. What could he say to comfort the young woman desperately crying in his arms? That, things have to get worse before they can get better. Or that she's at the lowest point in her life and that, from now on, things can only go up. In his mind, such cheap lip service was disgusting. He chose to stay silent, only offering her a shoulder to cry on. Naruto let out a drawn-out sigh of despondency. In this dog-eat-dog world, being weak is almost like a sin. But even if you're powerful, you can only guarantee your own survival. For all my power, I could never protect everything. On the grand scale of the universe, one man is nothing. In front of a reality-bender god, even I would be in danger. Against the all-powerful force of the void, in front of the universe's power, I am but a speck of dust. There were some groups and organizations like the Green Lantern Corps that tried to uphold peace and justice in the universe, but they were only minimally successful and their death toll was very high. Despite their efforts, intergalactic wars still raged on. Greedy dictators took over planets and enslaved their inhabitants, and mad conquerors destroyed everything in their path. And that was only on a large scale, to say nothing about the countless conflicts that took place every day on every planet. Armed conflicts, killings, kidnappings, physical and sexual abuse, torturing, human trafficking, etc. I've fought against evil for decades, even after coming into this new world. But no matter what I did, it always came back. No matter how much I stepped on it, the darkness crawled back, like a cockroach. Yin and yang, evil and good, darkness and light. Supposedly, for life to exist, there has to be a balance between these two opposing sides. But where is the light when I can see only darkness? Who is the light and what does it do to stop the ever-growing darkness? Where are all the benevolent gods that so many people worship and pray to? Naruto had no wild thoughts about him bearing the role of the light. He was but a tired old man, a lone man. He had been the so-called child of the prophecy, but he had still failed at protecting his own homeworld. If he could not protect his loved ones and his home, he had no illusions about being able to protect the universe at large. His power may have grown by a lot, but just like his powers, the strength of the enemy had increased just as much, if not more. Fighting against the darkness is like fighting a many-headed monster, which, each time a neck is severed, sprouts a head even fiercer and cleverer than before. Darkness is ever evolving, ever spreading and indestructible. That was the conclusion that he had reached after more than 100 years of life. That the laws of the universe made it so there would always be darkness. Darkness would never be destroyed for as long as sentient living beings existed. And this thought filled him with helplessness. Over the years, it made him lose much of the drive that he used to have in his early teen years when he wanted to protect every innocent being, regardless of whether they were friends or strangers. The despair of knowing that no matter what he did, darkness would never be extinguished, it slowly made him detached from the world around him. But there were moments like the present one when he came in contact with people whose pain he could relate to. People like Superman, people like Coriander. Those moments always shook his cold heart and perturbed his inner peace and calm. Asterism. What are you going to do now, Naruto? Kyuubi asked quietly. After taking the sleeping Tamarinine princess to one of the rooms in the ship's living quarters, Man and Fox were now back in the control room, alone. I'm going to turn in Vandal Savage to the Scions first. You do realize that this bounty was most likely a highly elaborated trap from the beginning, right? Kyuubi asked again. Oh, I am betting on that, Naruto said darkly. From the moment that he saw the Tamarin was destroyed, he realized that Kyuubi's hunch about Rui Nak betraying them was right all along. As one of the top information brokers in the Milky Way galaxy, there was no way that Rui Nak did not know that Corian's parents were dead or that Tamarin had been destroyed. That rat betrayed us, Kyuubi said. Most likely, he was paid by the Scions to deliver us to him. I can totally see those crazed scientists wanting to dissect you and me to see what makes us tick and what gives us our power. And that scum of a rat even sold his wife and kids for money, to say nothing of his willingness to sell you. Naruto nodded his head and added. The bounty to save the Princess of Tamarin was probably just to distract us and give more of a reason and make sure we entered one of the Scions' bases. Cold laughter came from him as he said, but I will play their game. Hee hee. At his different than usual demeanor, Kyuubi jumped off Naruto's shoulder and then stood in front of him. He looked him in the eye and said meaningfully. Are we going all out? Naruto chuckled softly. You know me so well, Kurama. As they were speaking, over a dozen space warp tunnels appeared within 200 miles of their ship. The radar of the ship went crazy and alarms started blaring as multiple hostile targets appeared within its scope. From those space warp tunnels, almost 40 frigate-class and even 8 galleon-class warships came out. I hope whatever the Scions had bribed the rat with was worth trading his life for. Because I'll rip him to shreds after I am done here. Naruto growled. It was not his normal voice, it was deeper and it sounded demonic. The nails of his fingers had turned into claws, and if it had not been for his masking jutsu that made his hair look golden yellow, it could have been seen that his hair had become blood red, compared to the regular strawberry blonde from before. Under his mask, his canines grew into fangs as well, and his already thick whisker-like marks became darker and deeper. A beeping sound was being made by the computer, showing an incoming transmission, but a clawed finger pressed on a key to reject it. He did not need to hear what the incoming fleet of warships had to say to know their intentions. On the large screen of his computer, he could see the footage recorded by the AI. The ships that had appeared on their radar carried the emblems of the Scion monarchy and the Gordonian Empire. They think they can trap and capture us like a beast. Come, Kurama. It's time we reminded the world what happens after provoking a slumbering beast. The fox met the man's fist in a fist bump, and, as the two of them looked at each other, bloodthirsty grins crept on their faces. In the next moment, their silhouettes teleported out of the ship. Asterism. Hundreds of ships were firing laser beams at an enormous monstrosity. A fission-type missile exploded against the torso of the beast and an enormous mushroom-like cloud of fire rose for tens of miles into the sky, even puncturing the stratosphere of the planet. A roar of pain came from the beast as a patch of its chest was burnt off. This isn't right. This wasn't in our calculations. Our data was wrong. A frail-looking green lizard man yelled hysterically. They had not known that the tiny pet of the mercenary they wanted to capture would transform into a world-destroying behemoth. That fission-type missile was the strongest weapon of mass destruction they could use without endangering the very core of the planet their race was living on. But that weapon that could lay waste to an entire nation had only scraped some skin off the beast's chest. The one that looked like the commander of the lizard men screamed. Everyone, evacuate the planet. Prepare the star destroyers and blow up everything to dust. Blow them all up along with the planet. His adjutants could not help yelling out in disbelief. But sir, our home and everything we've worked so hard for will. The adjutant, however, did not finish speaking when the sky suddenly seemed to turn black. His words died out in his throat when an enormous sphere of purple-black energy cast a shadow over the capital city of the planet. Boom. A cataclysmic explosion boomed. A white light blinded every living being in range, and the shockwave it generated deafened everyone a second later. The energy shield that should have been capable of defending even against a shot from a star-destroying particle cannon was obliterated. 20 galleon-type warships equipped with star-destroying cannons flew in front of the enormous beast. But despite the destructive might of their warships, everyone on board trembled at the sight of the colossal beast standing ahead of them. They have never seen anything as monstrous as that before. Blood-red fur, over 1,500 feet in height and over 2,500 feet in length. At its back, 9 enormous tails created tornadoes just with simple twitches. It was a gargantuan 9-tailed demon fox. Kurama. Sea of Fire. Naruto shouted. He was on top of the enormous fox's head, but he was so small that he could not be seen from outside. The fur of the beast's head was even taller than him. He was no bigger than a fly was on a regular fox. He sat on his knees, with both hands pressed down on the head of Kyuubi. A massive amount of chakra was being passed on from him to the demon below through his hands. The titanic demon roared. A conic breath of fire covered the entire sky. Like the furious waves of an ocean, the stream of fire obliterated everything in its path. The several miles-long star-destroying warships were reduced to liquid metal in mere seconds. Flames hotter than the sun melted everything. It was hell. And in the middle of that hell, demonic laughter shook the skies. Wahaha. Die. Die. Kyuubi reveled in the feeling of power, in the slaughter. Power like he had never wielded back in the elemental nations. A power not any lower than that of the 10-tailed beast, a god. He did not have many opportunities to let loose like that. When Naruto had unsealed him from his body, he was in his 40s. It took Naruto nearly 3 decades of studying the art of Fuinjutsu before he became proficient and confident enough to undo the seal without killing himself in the process. But after 40 years spent locked by the Shinigami's seal, much of Kyuubi's chakra had seeped into Naruto, fusing with him. That's why Naruto's whisker marks were so thick and dark now by default, and that was also why his golden blonde hair had become a strawberry blonde, almost red. Before unsealing Kyuubi, Man and Biju had been very close to the point where they would completely fuse into one single entity. When Naruto finally unsealed him, the Biju lost a part of himself in the process. In the present, Kyuubi could not regenerate his chakra like before, simply by drawing it in from the outside world. That's why he had become a glutton that would eat 24/7. He converted the physical energy from anything he ate into chakra. That was also why he took on the appearance of a tiny fox cub most of the time, to preserve his energy. But when Kyuubi actually let loose and put to use all the chakra that he had accumulated over many years, this was the result, a might far surpassing the original level of power given to him by his creator, Rakuto Sennin. Unlike before, there was no real limit to how much chakra he could store. Theoretically, with enough time and chakra, he could become invincible. He was no longer just a demonic fox. In the present, Kyuubi was like a god, a demonic fox god. Prepare one final attack, destroy their planet, Naruto said. His ruthless words would have shocked his younger self back in the elemental nations. But Naruto was no stranger to the atrocities that this race of degenerates had committed over their millions of years of existence. There was not a single innocent among them. When one wants to cut the weeds, they have to pull them from their roots. Complete annihilation. Kyuubi's booming evil laughter subsided. He had never fully lost himself in his lust for carnage and slaughter. He had not forgotten even for a second that his current power was possible only because of the chakra that Naruto was pouring into him, a chakra that Naruto absorbed from nature, on a planet even more polluted and infected than the Earth. Are you sure, Naruto? Kyuubi asked worriedly. Just do it. Naruto said grimly. I'm only acting as a conductor, not as the engine, I'm just pouring chakra into you instead of using it myself. The damage this infected natural energy does to me is not as bad as if I was the one to use it and cast jutsus. Despite his words of reassurance, right at that moment, his mask cracked and dispersed into particles of light. His perfect chakra control was starting to slip up. His red hair came into view now that the mask no longer disguised it, and the appearance of his face too. He was horrible to look at. Had Kyuubi been able to see how Naruto looked at that moment, he would have stopped his rampage in a heartbeat. Purple-black blood was flowing from a corner of his mouth. Most of the skin on his face was a mixture of dark violet and black, and he lost the sight in one of his eyes after half of his face had been petrified. It was a clear sign of nature energy poisoning. If he did not stop drawing on nature's energy very soon, at this rate, his entire body would turn into stone, becoming a statue just like the many other people before him who had lost control of their senjutsu. Kyuubi did not have a wishy-washy nature. He was aware of the dangers Naruto faced the longer he kept using this infected natural energy. So he did not hesitate. Cupping his fists together, he slammed them against the ground with all the strength that his gigantic body was capable of. A huge crack appeared in the ground, splitting the crust of the planet open for dozens of miles. Then, opening his enormous mouth wide open, the largest Bijudama Kyuubi had ever cast slowly took form in front of him. It was even larger than his half-a-mile-long body. At last, he fired it into the huge crack that he had made in the crust of the planet. Despite how violent and powerful the following explosion was, it was not enough to destroy an entire planet by itself. But the chain of reactions that it produced made up for it. The aftershocks and the rest of the berserk chakra resulted from the tailed beast bomb's explosion reached the very core of the planet. Only a few seconds later, terrible earthquakes shook the entire surface of the planet and volcanoes started showing signs of erupting very soon, from everywhere. It was the end of the world. After a few hours, the planet was going to explode from within. Make yourself tiny, Kurama. Quickly. Naruto said with difficulty because the petrifying process was advancing further than before and even started to turn to stone his mouth too. The over 1,500 feet tall and over 2,500 feet long demonic fox god decreased in size at a very fast speed until it became no larger than a horse. Kyuubi had realized that Naruto was in a critical condition. He made himself small enough for Naruto to be able to teleport them both, but also big enough for him to carry his wounded friend. In a flash of yellow and red light, the two of them appeared 4,000 miles away, in the exosphere of the planet, aboard their invisible ship. Naruto, you. The fox could not continue speaking. Except for his right eye, all of Naruto's face had turned into stone along with his left hand and leg. He was petrified in a kneeling position, the position he had had while pouring his chakra into Kyuubi. Naruto weakly raised his still working hand and put it on Kyuubi's chest. His index finger drew invisible lines on his chest like he was writing. Don't worry. I'll be okay. Kyuubi read by imagining what the lines Naruto drew with his finger would be in kanji. Naruto made a weak thumbs-up gesture and then proceeded to write again on the fox's chest. Call Lobo, return favor, rat bastard, warp ship. Earth. Naruto once again made a thumbs-up gesture to show that Kyuubi got it right. After that, his only remaining eye closed. He lost his consciousness. Asterism. While Naruto was unconscious, on the brink of death, and Kyuubi was fumbling with the computer of the ship to activate the space warp, the rest of the universe was in an uproar. The two of them had no idea about how far-reaching were the consequences of their outrageous display of power and ruthless violence. They were in every discussion of the upper echelons of all the powerful forces of the galaxy, and not only. The well-informed and powerful organizations in the entire known universe were shocked because the Scions were one of the oldest races of the universe, almost as old as the Guardians of the Green Lantern Corps who had created them. No self-respecting interstellar power could claim that they had not heard of the Scions and their cruel dominion over the lawless Vega system. However, such an old, powerful, and technologically advanced race had been massacred to the last individual in the span of a day. In the Vega system, the Gordanian Empire's ruling body was in a panic. Their allies and masters, the Scions, possessed far superior technology and means of destruction and/or defense. But they had been eradicated in only one day. Hundreds of thousands of Gordanians evacuated Karna planet in the following weeks, running for their lives. In contrast to the Gordanians, billions of other people in the Vega system were celebrating the day of liberation. The Scions who had taken over the entire system were no more. Countless people came out in the streets and celebrated together, regardless of race or nationality when the news of Scion's massacre came out. On Thanagar, the members of the ruling council of the Thanagrians were having difficult to contain smiles on their faces. For generations, they had been at war against the Gordanians and, as of late, they were even starting to get pushed back by the flying lizard men. Although the Gordanians had not been destroyed along with the Scions, the Thanagrians were very happy with the outcome. Without the Scions, technology to support them from the back, the Gordanian Empire's defeat was only a matter of time. On Earth, Jon Stewart had a look of disbelief on his face when Salaak, the administrator of the Green Lantern Corps, sent him, and the rest of the Green Lanterns too, a shocking report. The Scions of the Vega system have been massacred. An intergalactic mercenary, Uzumaki Naruto, also known as Caterpillar, and his companion, Kyuubi, a demon, have destroyed the Scions planet and the 6 moons that they had colonized. The Guardians have classified the two of them as universal-level threats. All Green Lanterns in possession of more information about these two subjects are to report to OA immediately. On New Genesis and Apocalypse, Highfather and Darkseid, the rulers of the two factions of the New Gods, were both frowning, though for different reasons. The Vega system was a place that even Darkseid had not attempted to conquer until then because he recognized the threat that the Scions technology posed. Darkseid did not like the sudden apparition of such a wild and violent dark horse, one that annihilated an entire race in one day. New Genesis and the Justice League were annoying enough as it was. He did not like the thought of such a dangerous variable popping up in his plans of world domination. As for Highfather, he went into a deep meditation, trying to make contact with the source. He was worried about such a powerful character being evil. His adopted son, Orion, the most valiant warrior of the gods from New Genesis, was getting ready to leave their world and make contact with the dangerous mercenary and his beast, to ascertain their intentions and thoughts. On the planet Almerac, a beautiful red-haired woman shot up from her throne, her face betraying the shock she was feeling. She was Maxima, the Queen of Almerac. A series of contrasting emotions flashed in her eyes, at first anger, then infatuation, and then anger again. She had met the mercenary and his fox a few years before. Infatuated with how powerful he was, she had tried to kidnap him and make him her husband by force. But not only that he had rejected her, he even stole one of their most advanced stealth-oriented warships before escaping from the planet. She had not heard anything about him for years, but when she finally heard some news about him again, it was about him annihilating a race as powerful as the Scions. Her infatuation levels skyrocketed. Flushed with excitement and desire and with her previous anger nearly forgotten, she immediately ordered her subordinates to search for more information about his whereabouts. She was definitely going to hunt him down and make him her husband. Lastly, a yellow power ring took flight from Quard, in the antimatter universe. Its destination was precise: the Earth, in the Sol system, Milky Way galaxy. Target: Kyubi, the nine-tailed demonic fox god. Yes, a burrito with extra cheese. Yes, the top floor. The name is Diana Prince. Placing her smartphone on the coffee table in her spacious living room, Wonder Woman focused on drying off her wet hair with a head towel. She had just come out of the shower, proof of that also being that there was only a white towel wrapped around her torso. A few minutes later, the doorbell rang and she left her head towel on the backrest of the sofa as she sat up and went to open the door. Good evening, ma'am. Here's your. The delivery boy's words died in his throat 2 seconds after that door opened. Good evening. Is there a problem? Wonder Woman asked, completely oblivious. And no, he said, his face quickly becoming as red as an apple. Long black hair, wet, barely out of the shower, striking blue eyes, defined cheekbones, full lips and a body even a model would be envious of. A body wrapped in only a white towel that strained to contain her voluptuous breasts and left her soft shoulders and strong yet still feminine thighs and legs bare. In truth, the costume she wore on a daily basis in public while fighting crime did not cover much more than the bath towel, but there was a stark difference in the atmosphere surrounding her at that time and in the present. Till the very end of the transaction, the delivery boy fumbled very flusteredly. He almost dropped the package with food when he handed it to her and, after getting her money, he bolted away, forgetting to give her the change. But he turned around after a few seconds, his face even redder than before, boiling, upon realizing his mistake. Wonder Woman giggled softly. It's all right, you can keep the change. Thank you and have a nice evening. She said with a smile and waved in goodbye. She may have been oblivious in the first few seconds, but Wonder Woman was not stupid. She realized the reason for the boy's embarrassment. After starting to live as Diana Prince among regular people, she began to understand how big was the effect of her physical appearance on most men. What I don't get is why almost everyone acts like that when I'm Diana Prince but nobody shows any reaction in front of Wonder Woman. Scenes like the previous one when men became starstruck were not really that common, hence her amusement, but it was a fact that dozens of men had tried to hit on Diana Prince during the past few months since she adopted this civilian identity, yet hardly anyone seemed to like Wonder Woman as a woman. Maybe it's because Wonder Woman looks like an untouchable being, powerful and dangerous, while Diana Prince is a normal but attractive and rich human girl. What Wonder Woman was completely unaware of was that her hero persona was way more popular with men, and not only, than her civilian identity. It was just that nobody would dare to express their honest thoughts in front of someone who could bend steel with her bare hand and throw cars around like they were pebbles. If she had browsed the internet for even as little as 2 minutes, typing Wonder Woman in the search engine, she would have seen how different the situation was. But she had never done that. She did not know about the hundreds of blogs dedicated to worshipping Wonder Woman or about the existence of websites like Rule 34. With these idle thoughts, Wonder Woman came back to the living room and, after plopping herself down on the sofa, she grabbed the remote and turned on the TV. Then, she opened the paper bag and grabbed the burrito from it. She took a huge, very unladylike bite from her burrito and an expression of bliss appeared on her face. What looked like an enormous ship of alien invaders appeared above Jump City. Wonder Woman put her burrito down for a moment with a dissatisfied expression and changed the channel. Everyone is asking the same question: who is the newly emerged hero? The princess's expression darkened and she changed the channel once more. The Justice League has yet to release a statement in regards to the previous incident, so we don't know what exactly had transpired, the host of the show on TV said, but one of his partners interrupted him. Nonsense. It's as clear as day that he's a hero. Everyone saw and heard that hologram of the spaceship's commander. Those alien freaks would have destroyed the entire city if they hadn't found their allegedly dangerous prisoner. This new hero saved millions of people that night in Jump City and with no collateral damage at that. If that ain't what being a hero means, then I don't know what is. Her face now scrunched up in annoyance, Wonder Woman changed the channel again. It was a music channel this time. A large group of women dressed in a bikini and other types of promiscuous outfits were dancing on the beach while two men were singing. Bitches ain't shit but hoes and tricks. Bitches ain't shit but hoes and tricks. Lick on these nuts and suck the dick. 1. Suddenly, the sound of a crash was heard when the remote control was slammed into the large flat screen of the TV, cracking it beyond recognition. A small vein was pulsating on the temple of Wonder Woman. Men. All men are the same. She said in anger. But she closed her eyes and breathed out in an attempt to regain her composure. No, there are good people among men too. She conceded in her mind once she calmed herself down a little. It had been almost 1 year since she had come to the man's world, and she had seen in her fellow members of the Justice League that men were not all that bad. At least not all were as bad as she had been taught to believe. There were also brave, honest, noble and self-sacrificing characters among them. But they are a minority. The average men out there. She let out a long sigh and massaged her temples with her hands. Since the Justice League's clash against the alien mercenary in Jump City and the Gordonian ships following destruction, the Earth had been thrown into an uproar. Her level of stress and her worries were off the charts. Videos of the incident in Jump City spread on the internet like wildfire. The videos did not contain scenes of Naruto's clash against the Justice League because all the civilians evacuated the area after Coriander went on a rampage, but they all contained the scene of a man glowing in yellow and red light, almost like an angel, annihilating the enormous half-a-mile-long alien spaceship. In the general population's eyes, he was a newly emerged hero. They had no idea that he had fought against the Justice League at first. That said, the entire Justice League was very rattled by the incident. Batman hid in his Batcave and has not spoken to anyone ever since. John Stewart was summoned to Green Lantern Corps HQ in an urgent fashion, and Wonder Woman herself just stayed at home all day, in her apartment, eating junk food and hiding from the crazed reporters. The rest of the Justice League did the same too, but after seeing the huge disparity of power between them and the alien, Wonder Woman, in particular, was almost starting to question her abilities. Of what use had it been that she had trained for thousands of years as an Amazon when someone could just obliterate everything in their path with a snap of their fingers? But she was stopped from continuing that line of thought when the doorbell rang again. Who could it be at this hour? It was already past 10 p.m., it was night. Furthermore, she had no real friends or social life outside the Justice League, and if they wanted to contact her, Martian Manhunter would have done it through their comms or even telepathy. There was no need to come all the way to her apartment. But when she looked through the door's peephole, a startled cry came out of her mouth. Mother. Asterism. Long blonde hair, blue eyes, and wearing a white robe and a golden tiara on her head. It was none other than Hippolyta, the Queen of the Amazons and Wonder Woman's mother. We haven't seen each other in so long. Don't I get a hug from my daughter? Hippolyta said. Wonder Woman embraced her mother tightly and she took her hands in hers after she broke the hug. What brings you here? Does a mother need a reason to visit her child? Hippolyta asked teasingly. You've never visited me before, and I. Wonder Woman trailed off. For a little while, mother and daughter became silent. Due to their laws, as the Queen of the Amazons, Hippolyta had to exile her own daughter even despite the fact that she had broken those laws for the sake of saving their lives. Because of that, Wonder Woman could not visit her mother and her fellow Amazon sisters even if she wanted. Yesterday night, while I was in meditation, I sensed an incredible magic power. It was like the power of a god. I've come to the man's world because I was worried about you. We met a very powerful foe. The strongest we've ever faced. He defeated the entire Justice League effortlessly. We could not do anything against him. If he had been evil, I don't know how many of us would have been alive now. Hearing Diana's words, Hippolyta took her in her arms and embraced her again. My little stars and sun. She said lovingly. Mother. Diana also said and hugged her back. They were warriors, born for battle, and they were both several thousand years old, but when it was just the two of them, Diana and Hippolyta were not Wonder Woman and the Queen of the Amazons but just a daughter and a mother that loved each other dearly. It's time I told you the truth, something I've hidden from you forever, Hippolyta said, and then she took out a pendant from her neck. An incantation spoken in an ancient Greek language came out of her mouth and the pendant started glowing with dark blue light, coating the entire living room with its color. This is a very powerful spell, one that was cast upon this medallion by your father himself. For a short while, no one will be able to see or hear what is happening in this room. My father? Diana asked in a strange voice. What do you mean? You said you sculpted me from clay and the gods of Olympus themselves blessed me with life and their powers. Oh, the gods did bless you with their powers after you were born. But they did not give you life. I gave you life, together with your father. This. Wonder Woman was at a loss, unable to find her words. She was almost 3,000 years old. For 3 millennia, she believed that she had been made from clay. That was also why her devotion to the gods was so intense. Because she believed that everything she was because of the gods. But now, her mother suddenly told her that that had been a lie from the beginning. Why did you lie to me? All this time, Diana said in agitation. I did it to protect you. To protect you from those that would have wanted to kill you if they had known about your true origins. Who would have wanted to kill me? Who would have even been able to? The Amazons are under the protection of the gods. Diana said. You and I both saw how much protection the gods gave us when Faust had turned everyone to stone. The gods, they do not care about the Amazons that way. We are expendable. Just tools that they can use as they see fit. If we broke, they would just create another set of tools to replace us. In front of the gods, mortals mean nothing. Mother. Wonder Woman shouted scandalized. What Hippolyta had just said could very well be considered as blasphemy against the gods. It was the first time that Wonder Woman had ever seen her mother speak like that about their gods and wearing that expression of bitterness on her face. You've ever wondered why the Amazons were punished to guard the gates of Tartarus for eternity? Hippolyta asked. Was it not because you aided Hades and the Titans in their battle against the gods of Olympus? Diana replied. But why would Hades, Zeus' brother, try to plot against him by siding with the Titans? And why would we, the Amazons, support Hades in his rebellion? Do you really think I was so blindly in love with Hades that I just went along with whatever he wanted without questioning the fate of my people? Hippolyta continued to ask. Seeing her daughter falling silent, she continued. One day, Hades came home while I was bathing and he joined me in. Mother. Diana cried out, her cheeks instantly turning rosy in embarrassment. She did not want to hear any details about her mother's sex life. But Hippolyta continued unbothered by her daughter's protests. Like any other couple, we started to make love. But I noticed that the way he was kissing me was different from before. Hades was a gentle lover, very caring and conscious of my needs. But that day, he was acting strangely. Rougher, more dominant, more selfish. I did not like it. However, by the time I realized that something was terribly wrong, it was too late. He had already spilt his seed inside of me. Him being such a quick shot and then teleporting away immediately after that further cemented my suspicions. That man had not been Hades. It had been someone else. Don't tell me. Diana muttered with her hands covering her mouth in disbelief. It was not hard for her to guess what had actually happened. It had been Zeus all along. You know very well the history and how many women he had raped before. In my case, he had not dared to do it openly. He had disguised himself as Hades, who was my lover at that time. Naturally, I did not hide what happened from Hades. You can imagine his and my rage at Zeus. But we could not do anything against him. He is the king of gods for a reason. No one could ever defeat him, except for goddess Athena maybe, one day. Coincidentally, around that time, the Titans waged war against Olympus. Hades jumped at the chance to get his revenge against Zeus. Though I hated Zeus too for what he did to me, I was reluctant to join him. As the leader of my people, I did not want the Amazons to be embroiled in a war of the gods. But he guilt-tripped me into accepting it, accusing me of colluding with Zeus behind his back. Zeus forcing himself on me that day, it had changed him. He became more taciturn, quick to anger, and always ready to explode. Hades became very different from the man I had once fallen in love with. As for the rest, it is as you know it. The Titans lost the war and Hades was exiled to Tartarus while the Amazons were punished to guard its gates for eternity for having sided with him. A poignant silence followed. I assume Hera would have wanted to kill me if she had known that Zeus cheated on her again. Diana asked. Yes, Hippolyta answered. But if Zeus has one quality, that is that he cares about his children. Together with great Athena, they made a plan. They gave me an enchanted necklace that hid my pregnancy and they also told me to sculpt a baby out of clay. When it was time for you to be born, they pretended to give life to that form of clay. Knowing that, as the daughter of Zeus, your strength would far exceed that of your fellow Amazons, great Athena sealed your powers. To remove any possibility of Hera becoming suspicious even of your sealed strength, Goddess Athena organized a birthday party for the newborn you, a party where she invited the rest of the gods to bless you. Goddess Athena blessed you with her wisdom. Goddess Demeter blessed you with her strength. Goddess Aphrodite blessed you with her beauty. God Hermes blessed you with his ability of flight and speed. Goddess Artemis blessed you to have unity with nature and wild beasts and affinity to fire. Goddess Hestia blessed you with the power to discern the truth. And now, the truth shall set you free. You are Diana, the princess of the Amazons, the daughter of Queen Hippolyta and the king of gods, Zeus. The sound of chains being snapped was heard and an aura of power and nobility burst out from Wonder Woman's body. Had it not been for the powerful spell coming off from the medallion that Zeus had enchanted, just that release of aura would have blasted the top floor of the building to dust. The spell will not hold on for too long, Diana. Hippolyta said urgently. Where are your bracelets? Put them on immediately. Though extremely bewildered by her mother's words and the massive changes she could feel taking place in her body, Diana automatically listened to her mother's words and tried to run to her bedroom where she had left her uniform. Wait, don't move away from this spell's range. Just tell me where they are and I'll get them for you. Not long after that, Hippolyta returned with the bracelets of submission and gave them to her daughter. After she put them around her wrists, Hippolyta said, unless it's a matter of life and death like it was 2 days ago, never take these off. They will continue to suppress and hide your true nature and powers as long as you wear them. Never tell of your identity to anyone, unless you don't have a choice. The moment you take them off, the gods will take notice of you and Hera will learn of your identity as well. An angry and jealous Hera is no less dangerous than her enraged husband. Looking at Diana, who was still silent and had a lost look in her eyes, Hippolyta took her once again in her arms and hugged her to her chest. I'm sorry I had to hide this from you for so long. If I hadn't been afraid I could lose you, I would have never told you the truth. I never cared about how powerful you could be while you were at my side. All I ever wanted was for you to be happy. To be safe and to feel loved. Diana could feel her mother's tears wetting the crook of her neck. She had never seen her cry, she had never seen her as vulnerable as that before. Hippolyta broke the hug and she raised her hands to cup her daughter's cheeks, making it so their blue eyes locked on each other. Even though Zeus forced himself on me, I never regretted giving you birth, Diana. I swear this on the river Styx. You are my little stars and sun. You are the joy of my life, my beloved daughter. Never think otherwise. Hearing her mother's pleading and filled with love voice and seeing her tears made Diana's eyes start swimming in tears too. She leaned into her mother's touch and hugged her tightly once more. Though her heart had been shaken by these revelations, the love and respect she had for her mother only increased after learning the truth. That night, Hippolyta did not return to the island of paradise. That night, Wonder Woman, a 3,000-year-old woman, a valiant and tough warrior, slept like a vulnerable little girl, curled up in her mother's embrace. In contrast, Hippolyta stayed awake for a long time, watching her daughter sleep. A gentle expression was on her face as she softly caressed Diana's head. The word immense did not do it justice. As he looked at the endless expanse of darkness ahead of him, he could not find a word in his vocabulary to describe its size. In truth, it was way larger than dozens of planetary systems put together, a darkness blacker than the darkest black. His eyes would have not been able to perceive its existence in the first place if it had not been for the accretion disks glowing at its edge. What is this? His voice was shaking. A brave and courageous man, someone who never backed down, someone who had dared to even fight against a god. That man, at that moment, was frozen. A primal fear beyond his reasoning gripped his heart. He could not breathe. In terror, he could not even look away. A thought came to his mind. This is the end. Alarms rang and many warnings appeared on the screen of his computer. The ship began to shake terribly because of the force pulling at it, dragging it away from its trajectory. Snapping out of his trance-like state, he grabbed the controls of the ship in panic and pulled on them, trying to steer the ship away manually. He pressed several buttons and all the engines of the ship blasted at full power. But for all his efforts, the only result was that the ship started shaking even harder and then, with a loud bang, one of the engines superheated and exploded. Kurama. At his call, a yellow and red light came out of his body. He stood up from the pilot's seat and then squatted against the ship's floor. The yellow and red chakra increased in density around him to such a degree that his silhouette became blurry, almost indistinguishable. His legs pushed against the floor with all the power he was capable of and he launched himself up like an unstoppable rocket. He broke through the reinforced special alloy that the outer walls of his spaceship were made of, straight into the outer space. Now, blast it! Crimson-red chakra burst from the soles of his feet, enveloping the several hundred-foot-long spaceship below. An enormous explosion boomed when the ship's main ion reactor blew up. That explosion did what the spaceship's engines could not achieve. It propelled him away violently, lessening the pulling force that had taken hold of his being. There was no sign of relief on his face. A tailed beast bomb started to take form in the palm of his hands, and it grew in size until it was as large as a football. But he did not throw it. Where could he have thrown it to? For millions of miles, there was nothing around him. Pressing his palms against it, the tailed beast bomb's spherical form was compressed to that of a plum. Then, it blew up and another violent explosion blasted him away. It was almost as powerful as a small nuclear bomb. In the vacuum of space, those two explosions hurled him more than 1,000,000 miles away from his initial location. Not enough. It's not enough. Desperation threatened to overwhelm him. He felt like no matter how far he flew, he would not be able to escape. He could not escape from the intangible claws of the devouring demon that had grabbed a hold of him. A shadow clone appeared behind him. However, the clone did not have the momentum that the two huge explosions had granted to the original body. In the blink of an eye, the original body had disappeared from the clone's sight. Despite the original body's crazy speed and momentum, it had still not been fast enough to escape the radius of the explosion that followed. The shadow clone killed itself by creating and detonating another tailed beast bomb in his hands, just so the shockwave of the explosion could blast away the original body even further. Terrible explosions with powers no less than that of nuclear bombs appeared like tiny suns as they lighted up, for a brief moment, the ever-present darkness of the void. The repeated shockwaves coming from them were enough to even pulverize some of his internal organs and make him cough up large amounts of blood. But after the explosion of nearly 10 Bijudama, consuming much of his chakra pool, his body gained such an astonishing momentum in the vacuum of space that he had almost reached the speed of light. It was a speed that no one could reach without the aid of a supernatural force protecting their being. With his body wrapped in a dense yellow and red chakra, he looked like a comet as he flew in desperation. But finally, he could feel it. The pulling force from behind was weakening. He was not far from his salvation, the event horizon. Asterism. He woke up with a start. He would have jumped up to his feet if half of his body had not been petrified. In his condition, he could only grab onto the bedsheets with his still working hand. He noticed that the sheets were soaked with his sweat. Closing his remaining eye, he tried to calm himself down. His heart was beating as if to jump out of his chest. Years had passed from the last time he had had that nightmare. But it was not just a mere dream. Out of the 3,381 missions that Naruto had taken over the past century as an intergalactic mercenary, he had completed 3,380. He had failed only one. It had happened when the events from his nightmare had taken place. A supermassive black hole located very far from the borders of the 3,600 sectors of the universe. It was the closest he had ever come to dying. It was the most terrified he had ever been of something. It was a fear that did not make sense because, normally, Naruto was not afraid of death. It was beyond his understanding, more than his mind could comprehend. 1 hour spent at the very edge of its gravitational pull had meant over 50 years in the world outside the event horizon. Though he had completed the actual bounty before the supermassive black hole's gravitation derailed his ship off its course, by the time he returned to show proof of his bounty's completion and collect his reward, the person who had issued the bounty had died of old age. That was why it was counted as a failure. 1 hour under the influence of that supermassive black hole had made him Unaging, immortal. He had searched for information about black holes after surviving that incident. In this wide universe, there had been other people too who had stepped beyond the event horizon of a black hole and managed to escape and live to tell the tale. But he had never heard of someone becoming immortal as a result of it. He had also never heard of a black hole of that size before. The largest one recorded reached only the approximate size of a planetary system. To this day, he was convinced that it had not been a natural phenomenon. Someone, must have created that thing. To this day, Naruto was left with a deep fear of the void. In front of that world-ending black hole, he felt insignificant. Old gods. New gods. What a joke. Who dares to call themselves a god in front of the void? You're awake. A girl's voice made him break out of his thoughts. When he felt the cool sensation of a wet cloth wiping the unpetrified part of his forehead, he opened his eye. A curtain of long red hair appeared in his sight. It was Coriander. A worried look could be seen in her green eyes. Are you okay? She asked, but she realized how stupid her question sounded given that he could not talk and that half of his body had been turned to stone, so she added, will you recover from this? All Naruto could do was make a thumbs-up gesture with his hand. He could not write as he had done with Kyuubi because he did not know the Tamarinine language. Now this is weird, the girl said as she brought her face closer to him and sniffed. The bed and your clothes are wet from how much you sweated, but it doesn't smell. If he had not been petrified, Naruto would have chuckled at her antics. This girl is not right in the head, he thought, inwardly amused. Coriander took his unharmed hand in hers and squeezed it, but without putting too much force into it to not hurt him. She bowed her head and said, I was scared and confused at first because I suspected the worst when you said my parents sent you to rescue me. I mean, they've been dead for years. I thought you were trying to trick me. But I want to thank you. You killed my captors. Your fox friend told me that you even killed the scions who have imprisoned and experimented on me for years. I have etched this gratitude deep in my heart. No matter when or where, I will always be ready to repay you for it. Thank you. Coriander was a little startled when Naruto pulled his hand free from her grasp. She was even more surprised when his hand landed on her head. His hand was heavy and his palm and fingers were rough with calluses from a lifetime of wielding weapons, but it brought her a sense of gentleness like she had not felt in almost a decade, from the time when she was a young child, before her parents sold her out as a slave. She found herself leaning into his touch, taking comfort in that gentle head pat. However, that moment did not last long. After a few seconds, his hand became still and his one eye closed. Still tired, he fell asleep. Asterism. A planet reminiscent of a blue marble could vaguely be seen in the distance. Having just passed by planet Mars a few minutes ago, the Earth was now only 20 million miles away or so. Ever since she woke up, Coriander had tried to talk more with the owners of the ship. But the man was in terrible shape, bedridden and unconscious, while the talking fox appeared to be in an awfully bad mood, even worse than when they had just met and he hit her. Any attempt of her starting a conversation was shot down with a growl and a fierce glare from him. After the third time, the girl wisely decided to stay silent and let the angry fox have his peace and quiet. Nonetheless, the ship's destination was of great importance to her too, since she was aboard as well. When she realized that they were on their way back to Earth, she could not hold in her doubts and worries and said, why are we going back to Earth? Last time we went there they fought against me and they fought against your master too. They are not friendly. Kyuubi growled at her again. Naruto is not my master. He is my little brother. Coriander recoiled at the anger in the fox's voice and stood silent for a while. I'm sorry for my wrong assumption. Don't be angry at me anymore, please. The fox let out a low growl from his chest. I'm not angry at you, but I'll get pissed for sure if you don't shut your trap for a moment. We're going to Earth for asylum. They are not bad people deep inside, they're just morons. But it's exactly because they're morons that they will protect us from others. Now that you know why we go there, please keep quiet. The Tamarinine princess made herself small and did not say anything else. In her mind, however, she wondered why was the fox so mean and angry at her all the time. Does he hate me? Or maybe he hates everyone, or it could be that he's stressed because of his brother's condition. Kyuubi was, indeed, stressed out and very worried because of Naruto's condition, but that was not the only reason for his irascibility. The main reason for his bad mood was the massive amount of natural energy he had absorbed. While he had not gotten ill from all the natural energy that Naruto had pumped into him, he was a chakra beast. He did not have a normal, biological body. It had certainly amplified his rage and violent tendencies. After all, it had been a crazy amount of natural energy, so much that he had become even stronger and more immense than the 10-tailed beast, his progenitor, a god. In comparison to Jubi, who was a mindless beast, Kyuubi was handling his power much better, and he had absorbed so much chakra that he had become a planet-busting behemoth. In the present, although it took him all of his willpower to restrain his berserk emotions, he did keep himself somewhat calm and in control. But Coriander pestering him with questions was not helping his situation at all. That's why he snapped at her the way he did. It did not take long for the Almaration ship to reach the Earth and its moon. When they were about to enter the outer layer of Earth's exosphere, about 6,000 miles away from the planet, Kyuubi spoke to the AI of the computer in the control room. Activate the stealth mode. Roger. Stealth mode will be activated in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Stealth mode activated. Based on the remaining fuel, the stealth mode can be sustained for 20 minutes, the AI's clear voice sounded. A light flickered on the exterior of the ship and, after a few seconds, it became almost invisible. A vague distortion of the space was the only trace left of it. It was the perfect camouflage technology. That's how they had bypassed the watchtower's radars and sensors 2 days ago as well when they came to capture Vandal Savage. The Almeration ship was about to enter the thermosphere of the planet when a very bright yellow light appeared seemingly out of nowhere and targeted it. Startled, Kyuubi used 2 of his tails to abruptly steer the ship away, performing a role that would have made even a professional pilot proud, managing to just barely dodge that yellow light. His efforts proved to be in vain, however, when the yellow light turned around and targeted their ship again, like a homing missile. This time, it was impossible to dodge it. But Kyuubi did not give up. One of his tails elongated and pressed a red button. Energy shield deployed. Shield capacity, 100%. Stealth mode deactivated. The AI announced. The fox growled in annoyance. The stealth mode being deactivated meant that the Justice League's watchtower would no doubt catch wind of their arrival, but it was still preferable to having their ship blown up by that weird yellow light missile. But the following scene greatly startled Kyuubi. The yellow light passed through the energy shield unhindered and then even through the thick glass of the control room's window without as much as making a hole or causing any type of damage. It was as though it was immaterial. The yellow missile headed straight to Kyuubi, who was in the pilot's seat. But now that it was right in front of his eyes and he could see it clearly, Kyuubi said in disbelief. What the hell? It was a power ring. A yellow power ring belonging to the Yellow Lantern Corps, led by Sinestro. They were not as well known as the Green Lanterns, but they were still infamous enough for Kyuubi to have heard of them in the past. The yellow power ring went straight to his right paw and enlarged enough that it fitted around it like a bracelet. An intense yellow light started to glow as it enveloped his body, and Kyuubi heard a voice coming from the ring. You have been chosen to wield a yellow power ring. Kyuubi, the nine-tailed demon fox. You will be subjected to psychological and physical reconditioning. You will be transported to. All the rage and anger that Kyuubi had been bottling up until then exploded. Don't screw with me. He roared, and a wave of crimson-red chakra burst out of his body. Psychological reconditioning. You think you can enslave me? You think I'd let anyone ever control me again? His size started to increase again and his entire body became covered in fire. The board of the ship and the supercomputer were melted in an instant and deafening alarms started ringing. The ship began to shake terribly because the computer that had been controlling everything was destroyed. The gravity generator stopped working and the atmospheric pressure in the ship started to decrease rapidly. The ship began to lose altitude at a breakneck speed, and it soon reached the lower layer of the thermosphere. Conflicting emotional resonance detected. Rage overpowering fear. Targeted sentient deemed unfit to. The voice coming from the ring abruptly stopped because, at that moment, the gorilla-sized nine-tailed fox smashed his fire-covered fists together. A crisp sound was heard and the yellow power ring was crushed into pieces. But Kyuubi did not let his rage cloud his mind any longer. Quickly getting a hold of himself, he turned and tried to grab the controls of the ship, except that there were no controls left to grab anymore. The entire board had been melted by his flames a few moments before. Just then, the ship began to shake even harder and the temperature rose at an alarming rate. They had entered the mesosphere. Their ship had caught on fire. Fucking hell. One disaster after another. Kyuubi cursed. He abandoned any hope of salvaging the ship. With no working computer and no controls to steer the ship while it was burning up from the friction with the atmosphere of the planet, not only it was impossible to save the ship, but they would also be in danger of dying if they remained aboard when it collided against the Earth. Not him specifically, but the unconscious and half-turned to stone Naruto and the Tamarinine girl would definitely perish. He rushed out of the control room and ran straight to the living quarters. When he entered the bedroom, he saw Coriander protectively holding Naruto's kneeling statue-like body in her arms, to stop it from being smashed against the walls and the furniture as the ship was going down. Decisively, the now large fox wrapped 2 of his tails around the 2 of them and brought them closer to his body. A loud crash was heard when Kyuubi smashed his fist against the outer wall of the ship. Even despite his relatively small size at that moment, he was only as large as a silverback ape. His punch was so powerful that not only that it broke the wall, but the entire ship was smashed into several pieces. The three of them were hurled into the air, but with his 2 arms and 9 tails wrapped protectively around the unconscious and petrified Naruto and the Tamarinine princess, Kyuubi curled himself in a large ball of red fur, protecting them from all angles. Now, the ball of red fur started falling towards the ground like a meteorite. Wait, I can fly. Coriander shouted at the top of her lungs, trying to make herself heard over the intense winds and air pressure as they fell. Kyuubi's almost rabbit-like ears were not that long just for show. Though faintly, despite the roaring winds, he still heard what she said. He unfurled himself from his curled-up position, but he still kept 2 of his tails wrapped tightly around the 2 of them as they fell. A bright green light glowed in Coriander's eyes and around her hands, and her face became strained as she tried to stop their descent. What the hell, woman, you said you can fly. Kyuubi screamed when he saw that their falling speed was not decreasing at all. Coriander grabbed one of Kyuubi's large ears and yelled as loudly in it as she could. Make yourself smaller. You are too heavy. This brat. His ear was ringing now. He felt like wanting to smack her for what she had done. I'll definitely smack her when we get down. Despite his thoughts, he did return to his tiny form as a fox cub. Regardless, his arms and legs and his 9 tails still latched around Naruto's waist securely. He was preparing himself for the worst-case scenario. If the girl could still not stop them from falling, he would enlarge himself again and wrap Naruto in his tails protectively like before. For him, smashing against the ground from that altitude would be an annoyance at most. It was not enough to seriously hurt him. But he was worried about what the shock of their impact against the ground might do to Naruto while he was in his current state. For Naruto's sake, he preferred landing safely instead of making a crater in the ground with his body. Sure enough, after Kyuubi became a tiny fox cub, Coriander managed to stabilize themselves in the air easily. However, as they were currently in the mesosphere, it was extremely cold, way below the freezing temperature of the water. Holding the petrified form of the kneeling Naruto in her arms and the fox that was latching onto his waist with his tails like an octopus, Coriander dived headfirst towards the ground at a very high speed. But, as it was a controlled flight, Kyuubi did not worry. They were only around 20 miles above the ground, somewhere above the Indonesian archipelago, when a very large construct of green light in the form of a human hand stopped them in their flight. From behind them, a group of 5 people appeared, surrounding them from all sides. They were none other than Green Lantern, Superman, Hawkgirl, Martian Manhunter and Wonder Woman, the 5 that could fly out of the 7 founding members of the Justice League. 2 days after the Jump City incident, the members of the Justice League were together in the Watchtower at the request of Superman. The mood in the conference room was stifling and unnatural. Batman seemed more taciturn than usual, Green Lantern and Martian Manhunter looked like they had a lot on their mind, and Wonder Woman appeared to be distracted, not fully focused on her peers. Flash was his usual easy-going self, but strangely enough for the rest of the JL members, Hawkgirl seemed to be in a great mood. Superman sat up from his seat and opened his mouth to say something, but Batman unexpectedly spoke first. Before you tell us the reason you called us, I'd like to say a few things. Looking back at what happened, I believe we could have avoided a fight with that alien mercenary. And it was all my fault. I want to apologize. Momentarily, the other 6 heroes were stunned. They had never seen Batman apologizing or admitting he was wrong about anything before, and they'd been together for about a year by then. Though no less startled than the others, Superman was the first to react. You did nothing wrong, Batman. It was the right. Please let me finish, Batman raised a hand and said. The truth is that we didn't need to start a fight against him right away. We could have tried to solve our issues with him diplomatically first. After all, he was not the violent type that couldn't be reasoned with. Quite the opposite, he tried to reason with us and avoid clashing against us. But I let my ego get the better of me that day and I endangered you all. I have no excuse for that. I would like to temporarily retire from the Justice League and... Superman interrupted him once again. Absolutely not. That's exactly the opposite of what we should be doing now. We have faced other powerful aliens before, but we stood united. Together, we could overcome them all. If we let just one setback break us apart, we will be doomed. Superman is right, Batman, Wonder Woman said. Don't beat yourself too hard. Everyone makes mistakes once in a while. But we are a team and we pick each other up from the ground when we fall. Martian Manhunter and Green Lantern nodded and Flash grinned and rushed behind Batman and put an arm around his shoulder as if they were best pals. Flash had expected for Batman to growl at him like usual for getting too close into his personal space, but, to his amazement, Batman did not as much as glare at him. For a moment, Flash even entertained the thought of asking, "Are you the real Batman?" But he wisely decided to not push his luck too much. "Today, I asked for everyone to be here because I wanted to talk to you about this. I am thinking of expanding the Justice League." At Superman's words, noises of surprise came from the other heroes in the room. "Over the past year, we've been through some tough times together. The last incident, in particular, showed me that the Justice League could use more members, more manpower. There are only 7 of us and the Earth is a very big place. It also looks like the more our technology advances, for some reason, the more often we get into contact with aliens. We have to step up our game." Martian Manhunter, who had been silent until then, spoke. "I wholeheartedly agree with what you said, but we have to consider what would the government's reaction be. And not just the US government but the United Nations as well. The Justice League becoming too powerful will no doubt place a great amount of stress on them. Our decision to amass more power could be interpreted as hostile. We are already under the entire world's scrutiny." While the Justice League were discussing in detail the pros and cons of expanding their organization, a very loud alarm rang in the watchtower. They all stood up and rushed towards the control room, with Flash and Martian Manhunter being the first to arrive there. Asterism. 20 miles above the ground, somewhere above the Indonesian archipelago, a very large construct of green light in the form of a human hand stopped Coriander, Kyuubi, and the turn-to-stone Naruto in their flight. From behind them, a group of 5 people appeared, surrounding them from all sides. They were none other than Green Lantern, Superman, Hawkgirl, Martian Manhunter and Wonder Woman, the 5 that could fly out of the 7 founding members of the Justice League. But when the Justice League got the chance to take a better look at them, they received a small shock. The turn-to-stone Naruto was terrible to look at. More than half of his body had become a statue and it had taken on a toad-like appearance. If it had not been for the tiny fox latching on from his waist and the red-haired alien girl holding them both and flying, they would have not recognized him. "Jesus, no wonder he used to wear a mask," Jon Stewart unknowingly blurted out, earning himself a glare from Hawkgirl and Superman. Green Lantern did a fake cough to pass over the moment and then a green light came out of his ring and encased everyone in a sphere. A deep demonic growl came from Kyuubi's and a crimson-red chakra started to bubble around his tiny body when the green construct of light appeared to have trapped them, but he did not immediately attack them. He could feel no negative emotions coming from the Justice League. Just a sense of cautiousness and fear. Green Lantern started by saying quickly, "We don't want to fight against you. I used my power ring just to isolate ourselves from the wind so we could talk." His words had merit because, at 20 miles above the ground, the roaring winds would have made it almost impossible for them to converse otherwise. "Why have you returned to Earth? And what in the world happened to him?" Superman asked. "Natural energy poisoning. We came back to Earth seeking asylum," Kyuubi said. "Why Earth of all the places?" Martian Manhunter asked. "Before coming to Earth 2 days ago, we had flown all the way from outside the 3,600 sectors of the universe. And then we flew straight to the Vega system. We didn't haven't enough fuel to reach a planet inhabited by sentient beings that were not in the middle of an intergalactic war or major civil unrest. Earth was the closest. Kyuubi could naturally talk to any sentient beings regardless of their language. However, that was not the case for Coriander. Besides the words of Green Lantern that had been automatically translated by his power ring, she could not understand a thing from what Superman, Kyuubi and the Martian said as they talked with each other. However, knowing Kyuubi's temper, she was getting increasingly anxious at the situation. She could feel that the fox was on the brink of blowing up at them. "We don't want any trouble. We just need a place to rest and heal up because our ship was destroyed," Coriander said. "What is the girl saying?" Superman asked Green Lantern to translate. "That their ship blew up and that they don't want any trouble." They momentarily stopped conversing amongst themselves because they realized that Kyuubi's situation was abnormal. "I sense a great amount of rage coming from the fox alien. I would not be surprised if he attacked us at any moment. Stay on your guard." Martian Manhunter's voice sounded in everyone's mind. The others became alert at his words because they knew not to be deceived about the fox's currently tiny appearance. According to the information that Green Lantern had shared with them before, that tiny fox was capable of becoming a behemoth that destroyed a planet. They knew that they had to make a decision fast before things got out of hand. If we let you come to Earth, what guarantee do we have that you won't start killing people left and right? Wonder Woman suddenly asked. Diana, Hawkgirl and Superman attempted to stop her. They thought that asking such a blunt question was undoubtedly going to enrage the Fox, and that was literally the last thing they wanted to do at that moment. To everyone's great surprise, however, at Wonder Woman's words, the crimson energy swirling around Kyuubi seeped back into his body and he visibly took on a calmer appearance. Listening to her mother's request, Wonder Woman had not told anyone yet that only the previous night she had become a demi-goddess. That is to say that her powers were naturally stronger than before, including her affinity to nature and wild animals that Goddess Artemis had blessed her with. In addition, Kyuubi himself did not want to be angry and start a fight with anyone at that moment. Wonder Woman's influence helped him to restrain his volatile emotions and rage. The Fox replied to her question in a much calmer voice than before, clearly more in control of himself. All I want is a place for my brother to recover. I have no intention of causing any trouble. As long as no one disturbs us, you have my word. Do this for us and we will owe you a favor. You should be well aware of what someone of our power owing you a favor means. As Kyuubi said, the Justice League was keenly aware of how important was a favor from Naruto and Kyuubi. But the question present in everyone's mind then was, can he be trusted? But even if they could not trust him, they did not really have a choice. The Justice League was not confident in regards to a fight against the Fox alien. Even more importantly, they had to think about the safety of the over 100 million people living in the archipelago of islands below, because unlike the first time around, they no longer underestimated Kyuubi. For all they knew, the Fox could easily blow up half the ocean in its rage. In the end, it looked like the current scenario was the best case possible, them coming to an agreement and the aliens even owing them a favor. Superman and Martian Manhunter looked at each other for a moment before they turned and nodded at Wonder Woman. Having realized that the Fox was more open to talking to her than anyone else, they let her speak for the Justice League. We agree to grant you asylum on our planet. We hope that you will not break your promise. But first, we'll take you to the Watchtower. Our medical equipment is better than what regular hospitals on Earth have. It's not something that medicine and science can fix. His condition and my rage are problems of a magical nature. But your presence feels calming. It's helping me focus. You feel different than before. Kyuubi said, his slit crimson eyes peering into Wonder Woman's eyes. The Amazon princess was secretly startled. I'm wearing the bracelets of submission. They're supposed to hide my true nature even from the gods. How did he feel it? It was Hawkgirl that spoke next. A friend of ours, Dr. Fate, is a great sorcerer. He may have a solution to your problem if it's of a magical nature. Inwardly, Kyuubi was a bit suspicious of their behavior. But he came to terms with it once he realized what the Justice League must be thinking at that moment. They're afraid of endangering the millions of people below. The Green Lantern Corps have surely found out about what we've done to the Scions by now, so most likely the Justice League is aware of my power now too. That's why they're so willing to talk now, Well, no matter. It works for us. As if he knew exactly what Kyuubi was thinking about, Green Lantern spoke at that moment. We understand how dangerous you are and we don't want to risk a fight that would endanger the lives of the innocent people below. But even if the Justice League might not be enough to stop you, you should know that the Green Lantern Corps most certainly can. I will also let you know that the Guardians have already classified you as a universal level threat and they have their eyes on you. Green Lantern and Kyuubi looked into each other's eyes silently for a few seconds. As a green power ring wielder, Jon Stewart's willpower was strong enough to look into Kyuubi's crimson-red eyes without flinching in fear. That fact alone earned the man a bit of respect in Kyuubi's mind. Just as you said you don't want any trouble, we don't want any either. I am telling you this so you know that we do have the ability to fight back. Unexpectedly, Kyuubi nodded at his words. I gave you my word. I'm not a human. I do not lie. Asterism. 2 weeks had passed since Kyuubi, Coriander, and the petrified Naruto had arrived on Earth and struck a deal with the Justice League. True to his promise, Kyuubi did not cause any incidents. Instead, he had spent most of his time sleeping, gradually eliminating the excess of berserk natural energy that he had previously absorbed. The Justice League had kept their word as well. Currently, a man dressed in a blue suit, a yellow cape and wearing a golden helmet was coming out of the javelin together with Superman and another blonde-haired teen girl. Dr. Fate. You've arrived. Green Lantern said as a form of greeting before raising an eyebrow and asking Superman, "What's she doing here?" A helpless expression appeared on Superman's face. "She's been pestering me every day over the past 2 weeks to take her up to the watchtower. Meet my cousin, Kara Kent." "Kara, this is John Stewart, a Green Lantern." But the girl in question was too busy ogling at her surroundings to notice the annoyance in Superman's voice. "Nice to meet you," she said in a chirpy voice before taking flight, starting her exploration. "She's quite a handful," Green Lantern remarked. "You don't know half of it," Superman said and sighed. Despite his sighing and the tone of his voice, there was a smile on his face as he looked at Supergirl, who was zooming around with no care in the world. "Shall we go?" Dr. Fate said from the side. The three men walked towards the hospital wing of the watchtower. When they arrived in front of the room where Naruto slept, Dr. Fate was the only one who stepped inside. Superman and Green Lantern remained outside, watching through the window. Sensing the newcomer's presence in the room, Kyuubi woke up from his slumber and opened his eyes. He had been sleeping on Naruto's chest, curled up and purring just like a cat. "Hard to believe a fox as adorable as that is as dangerous as you say it is," Supergirl said when she came next to Superman and looked through the window just in time to see Kyuubi arching his back and stretching his tiny limbs as he yawned. "That adorable fox can turn into a half-a-mile-long monster and blow up a planet. Appearances can be very deceiving," Green Lantern said. Supergirl stuck her tongue at his words, making Superman chuckle and ruffle her hair with his hand. "So he is the one who saved me from Argo?" she asked and looked at the sleeping Naruto with undisguised curiosity. "Whoa. Are those whiskers? Why didn't tell me how cute he was?" Superman palmed his forehead, feeling the beginning of a headache. "He used to wear a mask. I couldn't see through it even with my X-ray vision. And if you saw him when he came back 2 weeks ago, you wouldn't think he was cute. He looked like a half-human, half-frog. It was only a few days ago that his face returned to normal. At least what we think it's his normal appearance." It was the 5th time Dr. Fate came to the watchtower to cure Naruto. Living up to his name as the owner of the Helmet of Fate and one of the greatest sorcerers in the world, Dr. Fate did manage to alleviate some of the effects of the poisonous natural energy in Naruto's body and speed up his innate regeneration ability. Because of that, the stone and toad-like appearance of his face reverted to his original looks. His petrified leg had been turned back to normal as well. Only one of his arms was still petrified. "By the way, who is that girl?" Following the direction that Supergirl was pointing at, Superman and Green Lantern noticed Coriander, who was sitting on a sofa in the room, not far from Naruto's bed. The red-haired girl was focused on the PSP in her hands, busily pressing its buttons. "She's the girl that caused that big commotion in Jump City 2 weeks ago. Apparently, the Scions have destroyed her homeworld, Tamarin. Myself and Wonder Woman are the only ones who can communicate with her. She doesn't know our language," Green Lantern said. Supergirl grabbed the handle of the door and was about to go in, but Superman stopped her. "Don't go in there or that fox will beat you up good if you barge in." Flash felt that on his own skin. That fox doesn't like anyone else besides Dr. Fate and Wonder Woman. Supergirl made a bummed out sound. "I can see why he'd like Dr. Fate. He's curing his friend's condition. But why does he like Wonder Woman?" Green Lantern shrugged his shoulders. "Beats me. Something to do with the blessing she received from the Greek gods, I guess. But I can't help thinking that something is different about her these days. You've noticed that, Superman? Or I'm just overthinking things?" Superman nodded. "I can't put my finger on what exactly is going on either, but she does look like she has something on her mind." Though Wonder Woman had always been rather serious and kept most things to herself, the rest of the Justice League had noticed the subtle changes in her after the Jump City incident. She became more introverted, she talked less than before, and she looked like she always had some pressing problems on her mind. Also, her hero costume had changed as well. Oblivious to what Superman and Green Lantern were worried about, Supergirl knocked on the window and then started waving her hands, attracting the attention of Coriander, who was playing on her PlayStation Portable. Coriander tilted her head in curiosity at the blonde girl who was making her signs to come over. "She looks friendly," Coriander thought, and her face was brightened by a smile. Over the past 2 weeks, she had started to feel cooped. Granted, it was nowhere near as bad as the years that she had spent imprisoned, but it was a fact that she was bored. Seeing a girl of her age trying to make friends with her naturally piqued her interest. Leaving her PSP on the sofa, the Tamarinine princess came out of the room. "Hello. I'm Coriander. What's your name? She said and raised her hand for a handshake. She's saying hello and that her name is Coriander. She's asking you to introduce yourself, Green Lantern explained. Supergirl shook the redhead's hand and a bright smile appeared on her face. I'm Kara. It's nice to meet you. But Supergirl's smile became a little stiff when Coriander seemed like she did not want to let go of her hand even after like 5 seconds passed. Suddenly, she was pulled. What? She began to say but, before she could react, a soft feeling came from her lips, as Coriander kissed her on the mouth, muffling her words. Supergirl backed away with a small shriek and a hand covering her mouth. Her eyes were wide and her cheeks were burning red in disbelief and embarrassment. Did I startle you? I'm sorry. My people have the ability to learn any language through the act of kissing. You stole my first kiss. Supergirl yelled in embarrassment, pointing a quivering accusatory finger at her. You look rattled. Perhaps it felt bad for you. I quite enjoyed it. Your lips are very soft and they taste sweet. Did you eat strawberries before? Coriander said. At her words, Supergirl gave up all pretense and just buried her face in her palms. Only her beet red ears could be seen. Coriander kissing Supergirl had been so out of the blue that Superman and Green Lantern were still watching the scene frozen. They had totally not expected something like that. Asterism. You really helped me out a lot, Dr. Fate, Naruto said. Without your aid, it would have taken me around 2 months to recover up to this stage. The man in question was sitting on a stool next to Naruto's bed. His slouched posture and his laborious breathing betrayed how exhausted he was. I did it for the people of Earth. If it's in my power, I will naturally do something about it. It is in my interest as well for peace to be preserved. Naruto sighed at his words. You guys are treating us like ticking bombs. But I would never hurt innocents for no reason. Dr. Fate replied. You mean to say there were no innocents on the planet that you and your fox have destroyed? A low growl came from Kyuubi, who was now sitting on Naruto's shoulder like he had used to do in the past. Naruto weakly brought his good hand up to pat him on the head and tell him to relax. I have no regrets about annihilating the Scions. There were no children or innocents among them. Only insane bastards who had taken over an entire system and took advantage of the Green Lantern Corps' preferential treatment of them and their pact of non-aggression to enslave and kill whomever they pleased in the Vega system. Over the hundreds of millions of years that the Scions had lived, countless have died at their hands. Even so, I would have not attacked them just for that. I don't get involved in others' problems needlessly and I certainly don't do it for free. But they targeted me. They bribed my information broker and then lured me into their territory with 2 very well-paid bounties. It was enough money that I could even buy a terraformed moon, and it was all that so they could capture me. A fleet of almost 40 interstellar warships waited for me when I reached Tamarin. Though we easily destroyed them, I knew that the Scions would never give up on me, especially after learning that I was powerful enough to annihilate a fleet of warships. I would have probably ended up on one of their dissection tables too at some point if I didn't kill them all first. After all, I can't always be on my guard. I am human too, not a god. I'm not invincible. You're human too, was what Dr. Fate thought in his mind and had the urge to ask but chose to stay silent and listen to what he had to say. He realized that it was a very rare occasion to find out more about the alien's motivation and inner thoughts. A chance to see how his mind worked. There were 87 prisoners locked up in the labs of the Scions. Through the special abilities granted to me by this energy that you've helped me remove from my body, I could sense every single living being on the planet and the nature of their character. I could even get a peek into their thoughts with it. Naruto looked down seemingly deep in thought. I'm not happy about their deaths. If I could have saved them, I would have done it. But after a lifetime of traveling through the universe, I learned 2 simple truths. Being kind to your enemies is being cruel to yourself and that the world we live in is not such a pretty place where everyone can live happily ever after. 87 people died as collateral damage. But I ensured my own safety and I've also prevented hundreds of thousands or even more people that would have been captured and killed in the future by the Scions. I have liberated an entire system from their tyranny as well. Do you know that on over 20 planets in the Vega system, hundreds of races have celebrated the day when the Scions died as the day of liberation? On many of those planets, they even erected statues of Kurama and it looks like cults focused on worshipping him have started being formed. If Dr. Fate was silent before due to wanting to hear more about Naruto's thoughts, this time he became speechless because of what he heard. I see, people are finally realizing how great I am. It was about damn time if you ask me. Ha ha ha. But why is this the first time I heard about it? Kyuubi said, his lazy appearance from before a stark contrast with how he was wagging his tails in excitement now. I bought this information from a news agency after I finally got my face back to normal a few days ago, Naruto said with a chuckle and tapped his wristwatch-like device. I wanted to know what had become of the Vegas system after what we have done there. He turned his attention back to Dr. Fate and said. I'm not a psychopath or a ticking bomb that could explode at any moment. Believe it or not, I used to be no different than you in the Justice League when I was young. I was called a hero by my people, I've saved many lives. Even after my homeworld perished, I continued to carry those noble ideals and aspirations for many years. But time and tribulations change everything. In the present, in your and the Justice League's eyes, I'm probably just a deranged alien with more power than a man should have. He laughed bitterly. It's funny, isn't it? You either die young as a hero or live long enough to see yourself becoming the villain. Crisis, you can't be serious. A tall and athletic woman said angrily and slapped the table with her palm. But, without meaning to, she put too much strength into it and the long and luxurious conference table was smashed to bits, making everyone else back away startled. Your reaction just now proves my point, Superman said. I don't know what happened, but there is clearly something wrong with you. Over the past 2 weeks, you've been distracted, made mistakes you wouldn't make normally, and you've become very quick to anger too. Today you broke the arm of that robber and then lassoed him and dragged him on the ground to the police station. Now that was funny. It was like a scene out of a Wild West movie. Flash piped up and laughed, but he was the only one laughing. Noticing the glares everyone was directed at him, he swiftly shut up. Until you get a grip of yourself, it's best you take a break. I don't want you hurting someone for real or worse. Superman said. Green Lantern also added. You're not in control of your emotions, princess. Losing control in the field could spell disaster both for us and for other people. Superman is right. Take some time and rest. Besides, someone has to stay behind and keep an eye on the alien mercenary and his fox. Martian Manhunter suddenly called them from the control room of the watchtower. Everyone, Lex Luthor is on the move. He had stolen valuable pieces of technology from Star Labs. We have to move fast and intercept him. At the Martian's call, everyone rushed out of the conference room except for Wonder Woman. She let herself drop on the chair and with her elbows on her knees, she buried her face in her palms. She let out a deep sigh. Out of habit, an exclamation came out of her mouth. Great Hera. But after realizing what she said, she gnashed her teeth and, standing up, she kicked her chair into the opposite side of the room. I see. Anger management issues. A deep voice was heard from the entrance of the room and a chortle followed. Turning around, she saw a small fox cub in the doorway with his fluffy 9 tails wagging lazily behind him. She pinched the bridge of her nose and took in a deep breath before exhaling out loud, attempting to calm herself down. Just then, a man in a wheelchair came from behind and picked the fox cub from the scruff of his neck as if he were a cat and put him in his lap. Don't tease the poor girl, Kurama. It was Naruto. A bit over 3 weeks passed since the Scion's annihilation, and by now, with Dr. Fate's help, all the infected natural energy had been expelled from his chakra pool and his body had reverted to normal. He was only left with a temporary feeling of weakness. In his books, he considered himself fine. It was nothing that a few dozen bowls of ramen could not fix. But the sorcerer insisted that he did not make any effort for a few more days, not even walking until he fully recovered. Is there something you need? Wonder Woman said stiffly. I was on my way to grab some food from the kitchen for Kurama when I heard you guys arguing. Problems in paradise. They grounded her, Kyuubi said and snickered like a hyena. Naughty girls get sent to their rooms. Naruto involuntarily sniggered too, but he quickly tried to mask it with a fake cough when he saw the woman's eyes almost spewing fire from how hard she was glaring. Why? What did you do? Seeing her refusing to answer, Naruto shrugged and turned his wheelchair around. Oh well. If you wanna talk, I can lend you an ear while Kurama eats. Not waiting to hear her reply, he pushed his wheelchair out of the conference room and headed towards the elevator. He was halfway there when he felt someone push his wheelchair from behind. He let his head back and looked up to see who it was, but it was not possible to see their face due to the large pair of breasts obscuring his view. Nonetheless, it became clear to him who that was. Wow. They're so much bigger up close, was his first honest thought. But his eyes did not linger for more than 2 seconds because he practically felt Kyubi starting to grin under his whiskers. He did not want the fox to repeat what he had done after the incident with the Queen of Almerac, Maxima. He had laughed at him for months after that. Asterism. Ridiculously loud sounds of chewing and swallowing were coming from a tiny fox as he gorged himself on food. If in the elemental nations Kyubi could be described with one of the 7 deadly sins, it would have been the sin of wrath. In the present, however, nothing fit him better than the sin of gluttony. His stomach was like a bottomless pit. It is amazing how much he can eat no matter how many times I see it, Wonder Woman said as a means of getting the conversation started. That's not what you wanted to talk about, was it? At his question, the princess's shoulders slouched. It's a long story. I don't know where to start. Just start from the beginning. Not like I have anything else to do here, he said, and he poured himself a glass of orange juice. Why am I even talking to a stranger about these things? Wonder Woman muttered mostly to herself. You looked like you needed someone to talk to and I was bored. But it's up to you, he said easily and took a big gulp of juice from the glass. Wonder Woman sighed. It started 3,000 years ago when I was born. Sounds of coughing came from Naruto as he choked on his juice, and even the gluttonous fox stopped eating and looked at her instead with wide eyes. Did I hear well, or is my translation device broken? Did she just say she's 3,000 years old? Naruto asked Kyubi in the native language of their homeworld. Unlike Naruto, Kyubi did not need a translating device. He could understand any language spoken by intelligent beings in the universe naturally. No, you heard right. I can feel that she isn't lying either. Kyubi also said in amazement. By the void, she's even older than you. Naruto said in disbelief. And I thought Tsunade was a granny posing as a young woman when she was only in her 50s, but this girl, no, this woman is a grand many times grandmother. He did not finish his words because Wonder Woman suddenly grabbed him from the collar of his sweatshirt. Do you want to spend the rest of your life in that wheelchair? I'm in danger. Naruto chuckled awkwardly. Kurama, a little help. I'm still a patient. Relax, she doesn't have any ill intent, Kyubi said and went back to eating. Wonder Woman did feel like wanting to smack him once, but when she sensed the killing intent lying dormant inside the fox, she wisely decided to let go of Naruto and sat back on her chair. Are you always that short-tempered? Sheesh. Naruto complained as he smoothed the wrinkles on his shirt after she let go of him. Wonder Woman appeared to be distracted by his words. In truth, she was usually nowhere near as impulsive as she had become as of late. Anyway, I was at fault too, he continued. Looks like no matter the planet or race, all women are sensitive about their age. Should have kept my mouth shut. Hold up, how did you even know what I was saying? Goddess Athena's blessing allows me to communicate with people regardless of their language, Wonder Woman said, and he made an impressed sound. That's so convenient. But 3,000 years is even more than the entire recorded history of my homeworld, it's crazy when I think about it. As someone who's lived for so long, what exactly managed to rattle you that badly? Understanding what Naruto was implying, Wonder Woman shook her head. Although I've lived for so long, I'm not as experienced in life as you think. Until about a year ago, I lived on the island of Paradise, with my Amazon sisters, away from the evils of the world. I didn't go through any problems or difficulties until I came to the man's world. On Themyscira it was different. Just like me, my mother and my fellow Amazon sisters, everyone else was immortal. There were no crimes and any conflicts that we might have had, we solved them in a fair fight on the training grounds. It was paradise. I didn't notice the passing of time the way I do now when I live among regular people. We would spend most of our days training, singing, praying to the gods, and she trailed off seemingly at a loss. And what else? Naruto asked. That's all we did, she said uncomfortably, suddenly becoming aware of how wrong that sounded. That's all you did for 3,000 years. Naruto looked at her as if she had grown 2 heads. He had lived for only around 110 years, but he had had so many adventures back in his homeworld and then during his travels as an intergalactic mercenary that he could fill tens of books with them. I could probably earn a living just from writing novels about my adventures and selling them, he mused. Numerous life and death battles, hilarious moments, embarrassing incidents, the thousands of different places he had seen, the different creatures and races he had encountered, and so on. All that, in less than 120 years. Yet someone like Wonder Woman, who had lived for over 3,000 years, resumed her life experiences in one sentence: training, singing and praying. How can someone live such a dull life and not get sick of it? It's freaking 3,000 years. A look of helplessness flashed on Wonder Woman's face. With her intelligence, once she became aware of it, it was not difficult to deduce that the Amazons not noticing the passing of time and never getting sick and tired of doing the same thing all over again for thousands of years was not natural. It was because of the gods. A spell must have been cast on Themyscira to make them mindlessly chase just one goal, that of protecting the gates of Tartarus and nothing else. They were like attack dogs trained and locked up to protect a courtyard, never to leave or even think of escaping. I don't know what to think anymore. I don't know what I should do, she said in exhaustion. She had never been as confused and mentally exhausted as that before, and that led to moments like the previous scene when her bottled up emotions blew up and she smashed the table in the conference room with a slap. Wonder Woman did not have any real close friends to confide in either. Hawkgirl, the only other woman in the Justice League, was not exactly her biggest fan and the others were men. She was not particularly close to anyone. She could not talk to others about what was tormenting her. Naruto did not have Kyuubi's negative emotion sensing, but he did not need a special skill to understand what she was going through at that moment. Although he had given up on trying to change people in the world a long time ago, his innate gift of connecting with people had never disappeared. Neji Hyuga, Gaara of the Sand, Nagato Uzumaki and even Obito Uchiha were people who used to hate him and even tried to maim or kill him, but they were all changed by him in the end. Mortal enemies became his best friends and even sacrificed their lives to right their wrongs. Kyuubi often laughed at him when they reminisced about their past, saying that his most powerful technique when he was young was not his Rasenshuriken but his talk no jutsu. He had always had the talent to make people open up to him with but a few words. The same thing was happening with Diana in the present too. Despite that he was a stranger, she felt a strong urge to confide her circumstances to him, something that she had not done with even with the rest of the Justice League. The fact that she did not have any close friends did not do her situation any favors either. All my life I believed that I had been sculpted from clay and given life by the gods. For thousands of years, my faith in them has never wavered. But now, Wonder Woman stopped as though she was afraid to continue talking because if she did, her words would be blasphemy against the gods. Her lower lip trembled but her teeth sunk into it. 2 weeks ago I found out everything was a lie. I was born like a normal baby but not in normal circumstances. My mother was raped by the king of the gods I used to worship. And now, his wife, one of the patron goddesses of the Amazons, will try to kill me the moment she finds out her husband cheated on her again. Where is the justice in that? These are the gods I worshipped for thousands of years. I'm fighting to protect justice in the name of a rapist and a lawless and murderous jealous wife that wants to kill me. She let her back fall on the backrest of her chair. She was not crying, but the defeat and powerlessness in her voice spoke volumes of her feelings. She was exhausted by her inner conflict between the faith she had been raised with and the cruel reality. 3,000 years of blind faith in the gods could not be so easily erased from her heart despite her rationality speaking up against it. You said you left your paradise island about a year ago, right? Why did you leave it? What drove you to come out after 3,000 years? Naruto asked. Wonder Woman replied. A race of alien conquerors invaded the earth and almost conquered it. I came out to help everyone, to prevent that from happening. Naruto made a humming sound. Did your gods send you to do that? He asked. She shook her head in negative. No. Actually, Amazons are forbidden to leave Themyscira. We are bound to guard that place for eternity. He almost smiled at her words. So you left your home against the will of the gods. It was a rhetorical question, so he did not expect her to answer. He continued. You came out, against the will of your gods, to fight against the invaders. You didn't do it for the gods or in their name. You did it to protect the innocent. At those words, she raised her head and looked him in the eyes. Despite his rather scary appearance with his beast-like red slit eyes and thick black whisker-like marks on his face, at that moment, Wonder Woman did not feel any apprehension or trepidation when she looked at him. I can't put myself in your shoes. I can't imagine how it is to blindly believe in a god for thousands of years only to find out that he raped your mother. But what I can say is that the most important thing is to stay true to your values. It's not your origins that define you. It's not the gods who decide who you are. Your values and your actions are what define you as a person. He made a small pause before saying one last thing. Look at your past deeds and ask yourself again, who am I? I trust the answer will be much easier for you to find now. Asterism. Put me on trials, lock me up but I'll beat it. Watch. I'll be out in days. A bald man said, but a green construct of light took the shape of cuffs around his wrists and he was thrown roughly to the ground. Even with the strength of his power suit, he could not break free. Sorry, I messed up back there. Flash apologized after Lex Luthor was taken by the police and arrested. Apology accepted, Superman said with a smile. After all, although Flash did make a mistake, it was still he who dismantled Lex Luthor's weapon and beat him down in the end. As soon as the damage is fixed. Got a second? Flash said with a smirk and a red blur, putting everything in the room in order in the blink of an eye. Just then, a yellow portal was opened in the wall of the room. A green-skinned humanoid wearing a black suit and a dark blue cloak stepped out of it. Who are you? Martian Manhunter asked. I'm you, the newcomer replied. He was identical in looks to Martian Manhunter. He proceeded to explain that he was from another dimension and that both of their worlds were facing a crisis. And the dimensions appear to be collapsing on each other. Our Batman built this portal to try to find help. But what can we do? Green Lantern asked. We're not sure yet, the other dimension Martian replied. But my dimension seems to be at the center of it and that would be the best place to start looking for an answer. While the other Martian was explaining his plan to the rest of the Justice League, Batman secretly asked Martian Manhunter. Have you read his mind yet? Martians don't do that to one another. Jean Jones answered. Can't. Or won't? Batman asked. Both, he replied. At that moment, Superman asked everyone. So it's agreed then. We go. Sure, okay. Flash agreed. Right, Hawkgirl said too. What about your dimension's Wonder Woman? The other Martian asked. Wonder Woman is indisposed at the moment. She is temporarily not taking part in the Justice League's activities. Martian Manhunter answered to his counterpart. With everyone's approval, the Justice League followed the other dimension Martian into the portal. As the last two to enter, Batman and Martian Manhunter stopped before stepping through the portal. It might be for the best that Wonder Woman is not together with us, Batman said. Can you send her a telepathic message and inform her of the situation? Why? Do you think they are planning something? Martian Manhunter asked. I don't know. But it's always better to have insurance. Martian Manhunter looked at him blankly. Although he thought that Batman was just being his usual self, never fully trusting anyone, and despite that he did not have any reason to not trust his other self from the other dimension, he still did as Batman asked him and contacted Wonder Woman telepathically. Crisis 2. I've told you about Themyscira. What about you? Where do you come from? Wonder Woman asked curiously. After talking to Naruto about the worries and frustration weighing on her, she became noticeably calmer and more relaxed. With fewer things clouding her mind, she was free now to think about other things as well, and that moment looked like the perfect opportunity to find out more about him. Any information she could get about him might prove to be very useful for the Justice League later on. My homeworld revolved around the use of chakra. To put it simply, controlling the elements of nature with magic. Because of that, we called it the Elemental Nations. As for where it is, I don't know. An enemy of mine, because she could not defeat me, pushed me into a dimensional portal. It's been almost 98 years since then. All this time I've been searching for a way back home but to no avail. I have given up on it. Even if I did find a way back home right now, of what use would it be anymore? By now, everyone I've ever known would be dead. What he said was very depressing, but his expression was serene. He had come to terms with it. Almost a century of being obsessed with it was more than enough. Thanks to Kyuubi, he had finally let go of it half a year ago. So your people don't live as long as you do. Most people back in my homeworld were regular humans, just like the ones on Earth. I was not much different when I was born either. It's through years and years of bitter training that regular people could become superhuman back on my planet. We called ourselves shinobi, but we didn't live long lives. Our world was ridden with wars. 4 world wars took place in less than 8 decades. Heck, just in 4 years, my nation was invaded 2 times and even razed to the ground. Most shinobi didn't pass the age of 60. There was too much war, too much killing. Even so, it was my home. Wonder Woman could not mask her surprise. You were an ordinary human too. You mean that everyone can achieve that kind of strength just through training? Kyuubi stopped eating at that moment and snorted. HNG, as if. He forgot to say that he is the reincarnation of the son of a god and that I was his source of power for over 40 years. No regular human could ever reach that level of power. Most shinobi were so weak that I could kill hundreds of them with just a swipe of my tails. Naruto scratched the back of his head and chuckled. He's right. That's also why I look like this, he admitted and gestured to his face. Hard work was a major reason why he became so powerful, but he could not downplay the importance of his background as Ashura's reincarnation or Kyuubi's Jinchuriki either. At that, her eyes were involuntarily drawn to the dark scars on his cheeks and the slit pupils and red irises of his eyes. She was not sure what the fox's words meant exactly, but when she was about to ask another question, Martian Manhunter's voice rang in her mind. Wonder Woman, it's me, Jean Jones. After we arrested Lex Luthor in Metropolis, a portal appeared and someone that looked just like me came out. It was me from another dimension, similar to ours. Now we're all crossing over to their dimension to help them with their crisis, but Batman thought you ought to know that and stay vigilant. Wait, Jean. She wanted to ask for more details, but their mental connection was severed because Martian Manhunter and Batman stepped through the portal, crossing into the other dimension. She stood up from the table and said, "Thank you for listening to my problems. It was of great help for me to talk about it, it made me feel more at peace. But now something urgent came up and I have to go." After saying that, she rushed out of the room. Pushing the wheels with all his strength, Naruto's wheelchair became comically fast, fast enough to even catch up to the running princess from behind. A distracted look appeared on her face when she turned her head around and saw the speeding wheelchair hot on her trail, and she found herself smiling in amusement. But that smile quickly turned into full-blown laughter when she saw a tiny fox also coming from behind, running but with all kinds of meat and other food wrapped into his 9 tails. Still giggling, she stopped and said, "Why are you two following me? You can't be thinking of coming with me. Superman and the others won't let me live it down if I let you leave the watchtower." "Oh come on, what's the worst that could happen? I'm in a wheelchair. It's not you that I'm worried about," she said. But as Wonder Woman's eyes trailed to the 9-tailed fox that was running towards them as fast as his tiny limbs could take him, her resistance almost melted. Adorable. She was finding it difficult to imagine that a fox cub as cute and as harmless looking as that could transform into a half-a-mile-long behemoth and destroy a planet. Finally catching up to them, Kyuubi swallowed the remaining food in his jaws and said, "Stop worrying over nothing. Even if all of you were together, you'd have no way to stop me if I wanted to do something. We've been cooped up in this satellite for more than 3 weeks. I want to see the world below and get some fresh air. You know, I'm not going down to relax. It's Justice League business." Wonder Woman retorted. "You could fight it out and then lose and still do our way. Or you might as well take the chance to strike up a friendship with us. At least that's what I would do if I were you." Naruto looked at the fox weirdly. When has Kyuubi ever taken the initiative to approach someone just to become friends with them? Naruto had been together with Kyuubi for over 100 years and he had never seen the fox offering his friendship to someone other than him while having no ulterior reasons. Mildly amused, he decided to just go with the flow. Surprisingly enough, the stoic princess caved in under the fox's persuasion very quickly. Just then, Naruto's red-slit eyes happened to meet with Kyuubi's red-slit ones too. Having lived together for so long, Naruto could discern every little bit of emotion in the fox's eyes and on his face. How could he have not noticed the shrewd look Kyuubi had thrown his way? "What is your mind cooking up this time, Kurama?" But just like Naruto could read Kyuubi like a book, it went the other way around too. When had Naruto ever talked to someone about his private life or his native homeworld? The answer was almost never. Until then, he had consciously gone out of his way to not become attached to other people, and he avoided personal conversations too. He had only been obsessed with finding a way back home and doing business, his work as a mercenary, in order to support his space travel expeditions. There had been no room for friends or other types of relationships in his life. However, over the last few days, Naruto talked about his past with Dr. Fate and with Wonder Woman too. Seeing Naruto finally start opening up to people, even if just a tiny bit, made Kyuubi happy. And they were not just random people. With his negative emotion sensing, Kyuubi could discern a person's true nature, and he approved of both Dr. Fate and Wonder Woman's characters. Unknowingly, the fox had taken over the role of a father watching over his son. All he wanted now was for Naruto to be happy. Asterism. When Naruto, Kyuubi and Wonder Woman arrived in Metropolis, it was already night. But just as they got out of the javelin, a distant boom resounded over the entire traffic of a city of millions. "There is trouble. Wonder Woman said, please don't do anything to break the law and don't destroy those trackers. You promised. Not waiting for an answer, she took flight urgently towards the place from where the booming noises were coming. Hey, wanna see what's going on? Naruto asked after the princess left. Kyuubi narrowed his eyes at him. Don't give me that look. No way I'm letting you ride on me. Kyuubi barked at him. Why not? You have no issues with it when I'm giving you chakra in return, hey. It's different when I'm the size of a mountain. You're no bigger than a fly then. But now, how do you want me to carry you? Idiot. Just get as big as a horse or something, Naruto said with a smirk. He knew exactly what buttons to push to make the fox angry at him. I'm not your mount. I'll kick your ass, asshole. Kyuubi shouted. Naruto chuckled in amusement. The fox was over 1,000 years old, but he fell prey so often to such small provocations. His pride truly knew no bounds. Calm down, he said with a smile and then stood up from his wheelchair. Now standing on his feet, he stretched his stiff back and limbs until he heard a satisfying pop. He was still not at 100%, but that did not mean he was a vegetable. He had used a wheelchair over the past few days mostly to lower the Justice League's guard against him rather than not doing any effort because of Dr. Fate's nagging. Ha! As I thought, you were pretending. Kyuubi shouted triumphantly. But I wasn't. I still feel a bit faint and dizzy when I stand. For example, I can't use wind chakra to fly right now, but I guess that some simple wall dashing is not too much for my current condition. With that, he left the wheelchair by the javelin and jumped high into the air, landing on top of the roof of a smaller building nearby. He made a slow clawing motion over his face with his hand and a white Anbu-style fox mask appeared. Just as he was getting ready to jump onto another rooftop, a small weight suddenly landed on his shoulder. It was none other than Kyuubi. So you don't wanna carry me around, but when I carry you around it's fine, Not this time, boy. Naruto said and grabbed the fox cub by the scruff of his neck and threw him off the building. Naruto. Kyuubi screamed as he fell. Wahaha. Naruto laughed out loud and jumped off without a care in the world. He was still in midair, halfway across the distance between the two buildings, rooftops, when a furry red appendage wrapped around one of his ankles. His laughter abruptly died in his throat, and this time it was his turn to yell. Kurama. He hollered as he fell to the ground, dragged down by the fox that had suddenly become as large as a horse, just like Naruto had asked. One man screaming and one fox laughing, the two of them crashed onto one of the cars parked below, completely flattening it and making alarms blare all around them from the surrounding cars. For a moment, they glared at each other, but then they started barking with laughter. Asterism. While Kyuubi and Naruto were fighting and fooling around like man-children, the situation was completely different on the other side of Metropolis. An 8-foot-tall humanoid monstrosity was destroying everything in its sight. The alien was gray-skinned, extremely muscular, and vicious-looking bone spike protruded from his shoulders, arms and head. Wonder Woman arrived in time to see the Justice League fight against him. They're different. If their different costumes were not enough to tip her off, seeing a twin version of herself, her counterpart from the other dimension, was enough to convince her of that. But, as a trained warrior, she also took notice of how well they coordinated with each other as a team. It was not something that she and the other members of the Justice League were capable of. Her first impulse was to join the fight and help them subdue the monster, but she stopped herself from doing that. She could not exactly put her finger on what was wrong, but Martian Manhunter's telepathic message and the fact that she could not see the Justice League of her dimension were making her wary. They don't look like they need my help anyway, she thought. She decided to take on a wait-and-see approach. Not long after her arrival though, she noticed a masked man with a fox cub on his shoulder appearing on the rooftop, right next to her. Coincidentally, it was also at that moment that the gray-skinned alien started fighting back against the other dimension Justice League even more fiercely than before. He shattered a railway bridge, making the Wonder Woman of the other dimension rush to stop the train before it fell off to all the passengers. Deaths, and then he almost knocked out Hawkgirl with an uppercut and blew up a car's gas tank into Martian Manhunter's face, almost taking him out too. With seemingly endless energy, he also jumped at the black and white costumed Superman and started to slam him against the ground and the walls of the nearby buildings like a ragdoll. $20 on the ugly guy, Kyuubi said, making Naruto chuckle. I bet on the edgy Superman. Kryptonians are tough nuts to crack, and this guy isn't a pushover like the other Superman we know. Seeing two identical Amazonian princesses and the rest of the Justice League wearing different costumes, it was not difficult for Naruto to deduce that they were not the Justice League he knew. Wonder Woman frowned when she heard the two of them chit-chatting and making light of the current situation, but she did not comment on it because just then, the monster slammed the black and white costumed Superman so hard that it made a crater in the street below. However, despite the violent slam, Superman stood up with no apparent difficulty. What do you want? The other dimension, Superman said. The muscular and gray-skinned alien walked towards him slowly, his monstrous physique being seen even more clearly now under the lights coming from a helicopter flying above. Same as you, I imagine. The alien's coarse voice rang. Power. Control. But I had to see the best this planet had to offer. I am not impressed. At those words, Superman narrowed his eyes and lunged at him. Boom. A shockwave exploded from the impact of the gray-skinned alien's fist against Superman's face, and it shattered all the glass and windows of the buildings and cars 300 feet around them. Damn, that's some serious strength. Naruto whistled, impressed. Superman. Diana cried out in distress and was about to jump off from the sidelines and finally join the fight, but two red tails suddenly wrapped around her wrists, stopping her. What's the big idea? Let go of me. She shouted at Kyuubi, but he said seriously. Naruto and I made a bet. The fight is not over yet, so don't butt in. Hoo-hoo. Naruto almost burst into laughter, but he quickly masked it with a fake cough. Momentarily, Diana didn't know how to react to how ridiculous that statement was. Don't worry, I'll stop your friend from getting mangled if it comes down to it. At those words, Diana remembered just who exactly the tiny fox that had immobilized her was. Especially feeling the incredible strength in the tails restraining her, she no longer had any doubts about Kyuubi's powers. The muscular alien came to the new crater that Superman had made with his body. You think you can hurt me? He said, and his massive foot stomped on Superman's prone body several times, further burying him into the ground. My skin can withstand a nuclear explosion. He grabbed Superman by the neck, raised him in the air and prepared to throw another devastating punch. My bones are. But just as he was speaking, two beams of red light came from Superman's eyes and hit him right in the forehead. Drool came from the corner of the creature's mouth and he lost all strength in his limbs, falling to the ground on his knees. Kyuubi no longer needed to restrain Diana because she stopped trying to break free, too startled by what she had just witnessed. Superman had just lobotomized someone in front of so many people. What the hell, you really never lose a bet, do you? Kyuubi said, irritated. Naruto shook his head and admonished. Kurama, have I ever lost a bet? Over a century has passed yet you never learn your lesson. Tisk. Shame on you. The fox growled unhappily but did not retort. That creature single-handedly almost defeated the Justice League, why are those humans even pointing their backwater crappy guns at him? Tell me, Naruto, why are most humans so stupid? Naruto chuckled at Kyuubi's abrasive words. It did look ridiculous to him too that the policemen were pointing their pistols at the alien creature and then tried to cuff his hands. It was as if they had not just watched how he tanked Green Lantern's power ring blasts without even getting scratched. A huge swarm of reporters popped out seemingly out of nowhere and flocked around the Justice League, throwing dozens of questions at the same time. You lobotomized him, Lois Lane said, her voice betraying her shock. What's your question, Lois? Superman asked curtly. It's so out of character, she added. It's about time if you ask me, one of the nearby journalists said, and many others voiced their agreement. That's right. Absolutely. Another one among the reporters asked. And what's with the new costumes, guys? We just felt it was time for a change, the black and white costumed Superman said. Crisis 3. After the Justice Lords took flight and left the group of reporters behind, Diana suddenly flew in front of them, cutting their way. Where is the rest of the Justice League? And what were you thinking? How could you lobotomize someone in front of the whole world? The 5 Justice Lords members stopped in their flight and looked at each other. It was the other dimension Wonder Woman that replied to her. If you were raised anything like I was, you would be an Amazon. You should be no stranger to the concept of not showing mercy to your enemy. Diana clenched her hands into fists. Even if that was the case, why did it publicly? Turning towards Superman, she said. I don't know what is the situation back in your world, but here the Justice League is a symbol of hope. Not of terror. We don't just take the law in our hands to punish whomever we please. Justice Lord Green Lantern retorted. You think we were any different at first? We tried the same route back in our dimension too. Until our Flash was murdered and Luthor crawled his way up to become the United States president. Do you know what happened? He triggered World War III. Justice Lord Superman also said. Democracy is nice. But the problem with it is that it doesn't keep you very safe. Too much freedom leads to chaos and chaos leads to war, death and misery. If we hadn't taken control of our dimension with an iron fist, the world would have been destroyed. Do you think hope or honor or honesty are what keep people in line? No. What keeps them in line is fear. I lobotomized that creature in front of the whole world, for them to understand that crimes will not be tolerated anymore. For all the villains to learn what fear means. Diana could not help shouting. Do you even hear yourself? How are you any different from Darkseid? He also keeps the peace on all the planets he had conquered. That's not peace. It's terror. Justice Lord Hawkgirl's mace began crackling with electricity and she said. Batman was right when he said they wouldn't want our kind of help. That they wouldn't understand. Good thing that we've captured the rest already. With no further ado, she lunged at Diana and swung her mace at her wildly. Diana blocked the mace with her wrist guards, but the electricity made her shout from pain and lose control over her flight. She had awakened as a demi-goddess, as the daughter of Zeus who was the god of lightning, so normal electricity should have not been able to harm her. However, Hawkgirl's mace was made of the North Metal, a metal capable of disrupting all forms of magic. The Nth metal was the bane of all magical existences, and magic was what protected Diana and gave her supernatural powers. Before Diana could right herself in the air, Green Lantern followed up with a concentrated blast of green light, and then the other dimension Wonder Woman grabbed Diana's arms from the back and locked her in a Nelson hold. Right away, Superman came to the immobilized Diana and he punched her in the stomach with all his strength, creating a shockwave no smaller than the one that the gray-skinned alien made when he punched him, blasting all the glass windows in the vicinity. Spittle flew out of Diana's mouth and her eyes rolled in the back of her head. Did you have to hit her that hard? The other dimension Wonder Woman said with a frown. I know exactly how tough you are, princess. Your physique is not much below mine. If she was anything like you, she wouldn't stay down unless I used my full strength. Superman justified himself. From the start to finish, the other dimension's Hawkgirl, Green Lantern, Wonder Woman and Superman's teamwork was completely flawless. With the four of them working together against her, Diana was not given a chance to react in any way. Green Lantern used his power ring to envelop the now unconscious Diana in a bubble of green light, intent on taking her away, but a smoke bomb suddenly exploded in the Justice Lord's midst. Before anyone could make sense of the sudden situation, a massive appendage slammed against Green Lantern, sending him crashing into the ground like a cannonball. It was an enormous crimson-red tail. John! Hawkgirl cried out and dived down after him. But when she broke away from the group, a voice came from the side. Futon. Vacuum bullets. 4 bullets made of highly pressurized wind perforated Hawkgirl's feathered wings. Screaming in pain, she crashed into the ground not far from where Green Lantern was lying unconscious. Superman came to his senses immediately, in less than 3 seconds. However, for a powerful shinobi launching a surprise attack, 2 seconds were more than enough to reap the life of 2 unsuspecting people if he desired so, especially while working together with a tailed beast. Superman inhaled sharply and then blew out a powerful gale of wind from his lungs, scattering the curtain of smoke previously clouding the air. John! Shara! Superman yelled when he saw the unconscious Green Lantern and Hawkgirl and the blood flowing from her wings. He turned to the attacker with rage in his eyes. Who are you? He shouted. Why did you attack us? Once the smoke was completely scattered, the remaining 3 members of the Justice Lords, Superman, Wonder Woman, and Martian Manhunter were able to finally see who had attacked them. In front of them, an enormous 9-tailed fox blocked the very wide boulevard below with its sheer size alone, and the tips of his tails rose even higher than the skyscrapers of Metropolis City. The low growl that came from the fox next made their blood almost congeal in their veins. On top of the gigantic crimson-red beast, a fox-masked man stood while holding a woman in his arms. It was the unconscious Diana. Why did you attack her? Naruto asked back. A tense silence was instilled as the 3 still conscious members of the Justice Lords glared at the enormous beast and the masked man standing on top of it. It looks like they want to have a go at it. Kurama, prepare some fire for me. Naruto said and laughed coldly. He was too weakened to use complex nature transformation techniques like his Rasenshuriken, but regular jutsu were not beyond him. It was Kyuubi that was going to provide the main firepower anyway. He put the unconscious Diana down on Kyuubi's thick fur and his hands moved through a series of hand seals so fast that they were almost impossible to discern with the naked eye. Futon. Blazing whirlwind. An enormous stream of fire was shot from the Biju's large mouth and a vortex of pressurized wind was shot from Naruto's mouth as well. According to the 5 elements rock paper scissors system, wind was weak against fire because fire fed on wind. But when these 2 elements were combined, an even more powerful technique would be created. The stream of fire pouring out of Kyuubi's mouth was combined with the vortex of pressurized wind coming from Naruto's lungs and a terrifying tornado of fire took birth. The thousands of people below watched with trepidation the scene taking place above their city. The vortex of fire made the night sky appear almost as bright as the day. It engulfed the 3 Justice Lords, completely obscuring their silhouettes from view. The humans below could not see that Superman had tried to blow icy wind from his mouth with all his strength, but his actions were no different than that of a regular person trying to extinguish a conflagration by spitting on it. His Kryptonian powers were greatly restrained by magic. After only a few seconds, Naruto abruptly clapped his hands and the terrible wind and fire technique was instantly snuffed out, disappearing like magic. 2 silhouettes collapsed to the ground with their skin and clothes burnt up. They were unconscious. The only one still flying was the other dimension Wonder Woman, but she was in no better condition either. She was still standing only due to the magical nature of her abilities offering her a better degree of protection against magical attacks. Even so, she was on her last legs. Naruto's voice came from above Kyuubi's head. Although Wonder Woman was flying at a considerable distance from them, every word spoken by Naruto was heard as well as if they were spoken right into her ears. I don't care about how your dimension is. I don't care what philosophy is right and what is wrong. To me, your squabbles are insignificant. However, he said this word with a drawl. When I was at my lowest, the Justice League offered me asylum and they even nursed me back to health. I owe them a favor. The other dimension Wonder Woman grit her teeth in unwillingness. If you had not attacked us by surprise, do you think you could have gotten one over us? She shouted at him. A deep rumble made the skyscrapers around reverberate when laughter came from the Titanic fox's mouth. Naruto chuckled as well at her words. Don't tell me you also want a referee and 3 judges to score our match the next time we fight. He said in ridicule. What is this, some play fighting exhibition? Saying that, Naruto's and Kyuubi's obnoxious laughter reverberated through the city. Seizing the opportunity to attack is a form of strength as well. You're over 3,000 years old, how have you not learned that even to this day? He said, still sniggering. Naruto moved his hands and pressurized blades of wind gathered around his body like ribbons. With a flick of his wrist, a ribbon of pressurized wind suddenly slammed into the other dimension Wonder Woman like a whip and hurled her crashing into the ground right next to the rest of the Justice Lords. Aside from her, they were all unconscious. I don't care how you do it, you have 4 hours to release the Justice League from wherever you're keeping them. Otherwise, one of the sharp ribbons of wind dancing around his body suddenly extended to grab the unconscious Justice Lord Superman from the ground and yanked him up. Your dear leader here will die. The black and white costumed Superman was brought on top of Kyuubi's enormous head and thrown down not far from Diana. Remember, Naruto said to the other dimension Wonder Woman, you have 4 hours. I'll wait for you here, in this city. After saying those words, the enormous fox shrunk down in size and then, the 4 of them vanished into thin air. Asterism. It was still the same night, only 2 hours after the Justice Lords fought against Doomsday and Naruto and Kyuubi, that a portal was opened in a side alley, somewhere in Metropolis. Batman, Superman, Martian Manhunter, Flash, and Green Lantern, who was holding a slumbering Hawkgirl, stepped out of the portal, returning to their dimension. Thanks to Flash, who had managed to stop his heartbeats and fool the other dimension Batman into freeing him from his cuffs, the Justice League managed to escape from their cells. Eventually, Batman convinced his other dimension counterpart to activate the portal and let them come back to their original dimension. They are as strong as we are and just as smart. But they are willing to kill. They will not hold back. We can't win like that. Batman said. What are you saying? That we have to be willing to kill too? Superman shot back, outraged. I won't cross that line. Then how else can we stop them? Batman asked. You're the smart one, you figure it out, Superman said. Batman narrowed his eyes in thought. We can't do it. Not unless we cross some kind of line too. But as he said those words, he suddenly got an idea. When he looked up, However, he noticed that a strange mood appeared among them. Am I right to guess that you're all thinking about the same thing as I do? Batman asked. Flash grinned. The alien mercenary and his fox, right? He said he owes us a favor. Just the perfect time to cash it in. I hate to admit it, but with his help, beating back the Justice Lords doesn't seem far-fetched at all, Superman said too. Little did the Justice League know that Naruto had already more than held his end of the bargain. The six of them barely stepped out of the side alley into the main street when the portal that had brought them back before was opened once again. The other dimension Batman came out of the portal hurriedly, and even with the mask covering half of his face, the Justice League could sense how distressed he was. Just then, the other dimension Wonder Woman also appeared from the corner of the street, dragging herself by learning on the walls of the buildings. The other dimension Batman ran towards Wonder Woman, who stumbled and fell on the ground. He wanted to roll her over, but he hesitated for a moment. He did not even know where to grab her from because her arms and shoulders were covered in burns. Some magician with a giant beast almost killed us all, the other dimension Wonder Woman said with difficulty after Batman rolled her on her back. The members of the Justice League looked at each other sharply at the same time. Naturally, their reactions did not escape the other dimension Batman's eyes. What's she talking about? Do you know that guy? He glowered at them. He has captured Superman. If we don't return the Justice League in 4 hours, he said he'll kill him, the other dimension Wonder Woman said. Then, her eyes closed off and she fell into a deep slumber. In her delirium, she had not even noticed the fact the Justice League she had been talking about was standing right next to her. Asterism. When Justice Lord Superman regained consciousness, he found himself inside a spaceship. Looking around, he recognized the ship as the Javelin used by the Justice Lords. Looks like the Justice League uses the same ships as we do. Despite the familiar surroundings, he was not mistaken by his current situation because his entire body was burning. First and second degree burns were covering his arms and chest and even parts of his face. With his Kryptonian physiology, he could not remember when was the last time he had been hurt as badly as that. But the fox's flames were of a magical nature, and they were even hotter than the sun. He was a magic user. Ah! A groan came out of his mouth. He hated magic. You're awake so quickly even after an attack like that. Hearing that voice, his body stiffened. Following the sound, he saw a man wearing a white fox mask and a dark combat suit partially covered by a fur-collared cloak kneeling next to Diana, who was lying unconscious on the floor of the ship. Justice Lord Superman instinctively tried to jump up to his feet and lunge at him, but the moment he moved, an arc of electricity zapped him and his body shook uncontrollably while he cried in agonizing pain. A chuckle came from the masked man, but he did not even deign him with a glance. His hands became coated in a cyan light and he placed them on top of Diana's chest. The mystical palm technique was the bread and butter of any medic shinobi in his homeworld. It was not exceedingly difficult, but it was required for one to have a nigh-perfect chakra control in order to cast it. In his current condition, Naruto needed to focus more than usual to cast it properly. What did you do to me? Justice Lord Superman asked through gnashed teeth. It was Kyuubi who answered him. He was now back to his tiny form, a little fox. Where I came from, it was called Fuinjutsu. Nasty shit, I'm telling you. Even I got murked by Fuinjutsu at some point in the past. In this world, people call it magic, but it's the same thing. So pipe down and don't make a move unless you want your ass roasted. Haha. Superman watched for a few moments how Naruto continued to heal Diana, but there were dozens of questions in his mind. What happened to the others? And why did you capture me? What are you planning? The more he spoke, the angrier he became, and he unconsciously tried to move once more, only to be electrocuted and made to scream in agony again. Kyuubi snickered like a hyena at the sight of his suffering. Stupid. Are you a masochist? Naruto's control over his mystical palm technique was broken when he snorted with laughter. Don't make me laugh, Kurama, or I can't focus. And you there, shut your pee-hole. No one is dead, I only took you hostage until your pals released the rest of the Justice League, he said to Justice Lord Superman. After that, he knelt on the floor and went back to healing Diana. He's gonna kill you, you know. Kyuubi said snidely and snickered. If your friends don't release the Justice League in 2 hours, hehe, you're as good as dead. Naruto stopped his mystical palm technique again. Kurama, I swear to the void. Luckily for Naruto, he was wearing his mask, or otherwise Kyuubi would have seen the traitorous grin on his face in spite of his different words. Though Naruto wanted to concentrate on healing Diana, Kyuubi was making it very hard for him to focus. It always cracked him up to see the fox toying with his prey. Oh come on, what's the fun in that? Don't worry about your princess, she's fine. Kyuubi exhorted. What? She's not my princess. This dickhead hit her so hard that you'd think he was trying to kill her. I owe the Justice League a favor, so I'm just making sure that she is fine. Nothing more than that, the fox said, his voice dripping with all kinds of insinuations. Nothing more. Naruto bit out. Kyuubi chortled at his overreaction, but he didn't press the issue. Now that it was silence again, Naruto went back to channeling the mystic palm technique. Ya know, I've never eaten a Kryptonian before. I wonder how they taste like. Kyuubi said after a while. Naruto stood up in annoyance. Alright, that's it, he said and grabbed Kyuubi by the scruff of his neck like one would grab a naughty cat and threw him out of the javelin. He was about to start casting the healing technique again, but he could not help stopping in his tracks when a massive head appeared on the front window of the ship. Kyuubi had grown very large and pressed his huge head against the window of the cockpit, staring at Justice Lord Superman unblinkingly and licking his whiskers in a hungry fashion. Naruto finally gave up. He burst into laughter. Justice League Unlimited. His hands coated in a cyan light and with beads of sweat appearing on his forehead, Naruto focused on speeding up Wonder Woman's recovery. Even so, he could not help letting his eyes roam over her face. Long and silky-looking raven black locks of hair, unblemished pale white skin, a pair of supple eyebrows, a cute and small nose, symmetrical and defined cheekbones, an oval face and a pair of luscious, plush and naturally red lips. Naruto felt his pulse speed up when he looked at her. No doubt, she's the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. Feeling his chakra flow slipping out of his control, he closed his eyes and shook his head to dispel the distracting effect that her flawless beauty had on him. Resolutely, he refused to look at her face anymore and chose instead to keep his eyes locked on his hands, or else he would not be able to maintain his mystic palm technique. But that proved to be no good either, because after 2 minutes he got bored and his eyes unwittingly jumped to what could be seen beyond his hovering hands. Huge was the only thing he could think about. Before he could stop himself, his cyan chakra-coated hands lowered and lightly pressed against the large mounds of flesh below. The soft but springy sensation coming from his palms when he touched her peaks was like a small electric shock for his body. But it lasted only for a second, because he quickly lifted his hands up and turned his head away, closing his eyes tightly. When he opened his eyes, however, he noticed, to his horror, that the giant fox pressing his huge head against the window of the ship had seen everything that he had done. It's over. Ah, I wanna die. Kurama will never let me live it down. He was not allowed the luxury to even wallow in his own inner misery and prepare his heart for the aftermath, because at that moment, a strangely sensual voice, in his distorted point of view, came from the woman lying below. NNG, why were you touching my chest? Naruto froze, even the chakra flow to his hands halted and the mystic palm technique stopped. 3 infinitely long seconds passed, with Naruto just staring at her stupidly, momentarily not knowing what to say. He dressed his voice awkwardly. I was, healing you. A sound between a scoff and a chuckle came from the fox outside the ship. That's not how the mystic palm technique works. You don't need direct contact. You just wanted to feel up her big milkers and. Kurama, you shut your trap. Naruto hollered. Understanding what was going on, a hue of pink appeared on Diana's normally pale cheeks. I am exhausted and far from being in my best state. It was an accident. Kyuubi returned to a smaller size and rushed back inside the ship very quickly, not wanting to miss out on even 1 second of fun. So you switched from, I was healing her, to, it was an accident. Bwahahaha. He mock imitated Naruto's voice and then barked with laughter. As if they could read each other's mind, in the next moment, a human-sized fox and a man lunged at each other at the same time. It was a full-on brawl. The two of them started rolling on the ground and clobbering each other with punches, trying to strangle the other with their hands or tails, and even trying to bite each other in a mess of tails and limbs, while Diana and Justice Lord Superman watched them with a blank look on their faces. Normally, this kind of brawls ended up with Naruto getting the upper hand due to his superior hand-to-hand combat skills, but this time it was a completely different story. Huffing and breathing out heavily, Naruto was eventually thrown flat-faced on the floor, sprawled on his stomach, while the human-sized 9-tailed fox plopped himself heavily with his butt on his back. Triumphant laughter came from the fox. Wahaha. I win. Now say it. Say it. Piece of shit. Naruto cursed under his breath. At his words, Kyuubi's size increased, suddenly becoming 400 pounds heavier. I give up. Naruto cried out breathlessly. Then say it. Kyuubi said with a gloating voice. Kurama, Sama. Kyuubi's size increased once again and Naruto started tapping on the floor with his hand like the loser tapping out in a wrestling match. Arg. Jarif me you fat fuck, you're gonna crush my spine. The huge fox brought a hand to one of his large, rabbit-like ears and sang. I can't hear you. Kurama-sama. When Naruto finally yelled those words, an expression as if he had just attained nirvana and ascended to heaven appeared on Kyuubi's face. Brawling against each other without using any kind of ability or chakra reinforcement technique was almost like a tradition for Naruto and Kyuubi. They only used their physical strength and Kyuubi adopted a size similar to Naruto. Whoever lost had to call the winner, master, and obey his commands for a week. It was how they solved their issues and let out some steam. Usually, it ended either in a tie or with Kyuubi outright losing because Naruto's physical strength was not any lower than his while his fighting IQ was leagues beyond that of the Biju. Kyuubi could count on the claws of one paw the number of times he had won against Naruto over the past almost 10 years. It went without saying how frustrating that was. This time, however, by taking advantage of Naruto's weakness, the fox won. His elation was beyond words. Justice Lord Superman was lying completely still on the floor with a seal painted on his forehead and Diana was similarly sitting on the floor while watching in stupefaction how the giant fox was crushing a screaming Naruto under the weight of his massive butt. That was the scene on which the Justice League in the other dimension Batman stumbled upon when they finally found the javelin. Witnessing the huge fox tormenting Naruto, an incredulous voice came from the other dimension Batman. That is the guy that crushed the Justice Lords. Asterism. I'm so tired. Naruto complained, now needing to sit and rest in his wheelchair for real. I was still recovering but I was forced to use so much energy to fight the Justice Lords and then to heal both Hawkgirl and Wonder Woman. Whatever shall I do? Only ramen can save me now. At least 49 bowls of it. A soft hand grabbed him by one ear and twisted it slightly, enough to make him uncomfortable but not enough to cause him pain. He heard Diana's threatening voice coming from behind. Don't think that playing the victim will make me forget what you did. Naruto suddenly stopped his whining and became as silent as a grave, making both Diana and the fox on his shoulder giggle at his meek reaction. Deciding to figuratively pour salt on the open wound, Kyuubi said. Listen up, slave. Lightning Rasengan. Now. Naruto burst with indignation. You asshole, I'm seriously weak now. I can't expend more chakra. Rasengans are too hard to make when I'm like this. He yelled at him. Kyuubi laughed uncaringly. For all I know, you could be faking it again. You pretended you needed a wheelchair for almost a week when you could walk around just fine. So gimme my lightning Rasengan now. Remember, you're my slave for a week. You don't wanna go back on your word, do you? Unless you want me to start talking about stuff. I'm sure that certain people would love to hear more about it. Naruto did not need to have eyes in the back of his head to feel that Diana, who was standing behind his wheelchair, suddenly made a very interested face at Kyuubi's words. He ground his teeth in unwillingness but he raised his hand in defeat. A spiraling sphere of blue energy took shape in his palm and yellow arcs of lightning started to dance on its surface once he added lightning nature chakra to it too. Not waiting for an invitation, the tiny fox stuck out his small tongue and licked at the sphere of lightning chakra. An electric current coursed through him and the crimson-red fur all over his body stood straight like needles, but Kyuubi let out an excited sound of delight and started taking small but quick bites off the lightning Rasengan. He had traveled the universe from one corner to the other alongside Naruto and he had eaten countless types of dishes and the raw meat of countless creatures. However, nothing had ever come close to tasting as good to Kyuubi as Naruto's chakra. It was the ultimate delicacy. From behind, Diana was giggling silently to herself as she watched the interactions between the two of them. She was especially amused at how the fox cub's previously fluffy nine tails looked like a hacksaw now, but he still continued to eat the electrifying treat with gusto. The other members of the Justice League that were in the javelin were looking curiously at them, especially at Wonder Woman, who was acting completely different compared to how angry and frustrated she had been a few hours before. Since when did she become so chummy with the two of them? Flash asked Green Lantern and Hawkgirl, who were sitting next to him. Something must have happened while we were captured. But the fox liked her from the beginning, so I'm not that surprised. What I'm surprised about is the mercenary allowing the princess to pull on his ear like that and not saying anything back. Hawkgirl replied. If only the Guardians could see now who they classified as universal level threats. Green Lantern trailed off, making Flash and Hawkgirl laugh. Meanwhile, Superman and Martian Manhunter were standing close to Batman, who was piloting the Javelin. Currently, they were heading back to the Watchtower. Can't say I'm not happy how easily we got rid of the Justice Lords. I expected a lot more struggle. Superman said. It looks like the mercenary really is a man of his word. He returned the favor he owed us without us asking him to do it. Martian Manhunter said and glanced back the masked Naruto, who was sitting in his wheelchair and feeding Kyuubi a ball of lightning energy. Superman nodded in agreement. True. And he helped Hawkgirl recover as well. By all means, she was in a hospital before that. 1. After Naruto had confirmed that the Justice League was fine, he let go of Justice Lord Superman and freed him from the effect of his painful Fuinjutsu. Then, the other dimension Batman took the rest of the Justice Lords and left, going back to their dimension. Now, the Justice League together with Naruto and Kyuubi were returning to the Watchtower. What's on your mind, Batman? Superman asked when he saw him being silent. Wonder Woman looks different from earlier today, so I'm thinking that, he said. Oh ho, are you perhaps jealous? Superman cut in and joked. The only answer he got was a blank stare. The Gotham vigilante was not impressed. Right, who am I kidding? There's no space for human emotions in that broody heart of yours, the Man of Steel said. I was thinking that it's time we started our plans. Now that Wonder Woman seems to be back to normal, all 7 of us can finally make decisions together. Batman continued in his usual tone. The Justice League did not have a ruler per se. They were a team and everyone's opinion held equal value in the eyes of the others when it came to making important decisions. Because of Wonder Woman's previous emotional instability and absent-minded behavior, the 6 of them had been putting off their plans to expand the Justice League for the past 3 weeks. That was a very important matter and they had not wanted to leave Wonder Woman out of it. Asterism. A few days later, all 7 members of the Justice League were gathered together in the Watchtower. They were sitting at a table, except for Superman, who was standing on his feet. Since we all agree that the Justice League has to expand, we need to understand the consequences of that. First of all, the United Nations will not like it, not one bit. We can expect that among the heroes that we recruit, there could also be moles from the government or the United Nations. Because of that, we need to be certain that we can trust each other. With everything. Realizing what Superman's words alluded to, Flash said, a bit flustered. Hold on a second here. What about the whole secret identity thing? I mean, I trust you guys, but I'm not sure I'm ready to expose myself yet. You do realize that Batman and Superman already know everyone's identities, right? Probably Jean knows it too. Moreover, the princess and I don't have a secret identity, and Hawkgirl can't exactly disguise herself with her wings either. Green Lantern said. While they were talking, Batman was the first to take the initiative and pulled off his mask. I'm Bruce Wayne. Superman also took a pair of round glasses from somewhere and put them on his eyes. I'm Clark Kent. Show off. Flash mumbled and sagged his shoulders when he heard who exactly Batman was. I'm Wally West, he said and took off his mask too. Red hair. It suits you. Wonder Woman, who sat next to him, said with a smile and playfully rubbed the top of his head. Flash perked up at her words. You think? He asked in a voice that betrayed how happy he felt at her compliment. Everyone knew who Green Lantern was, and that was the same for Martian Manhunter and Wonder Woman. The 3 of them had never attempted to hide their identities. Everyone turned to look at Hawkgirl, who was the only one who had not taken off her mask. She was looking down, as though she was thinking intensely about something. Before I tell you who I really am, I ask you to please listen and not interrupt me until the end. Noticing her unusual seriousness, the others piped down and focused their attention on her. Hawkgirl took off her bird mask and said. My name is Shara Hole. I am a lieutenant and an espionage instructor in the Thonagrian Intergalactic Army. Despite her request to not be interrupted, Jon Stewart cried out. You mean to say that you are a spy? Similarly, Superman and Wonder Woman stood up and looked at her with serious eyes. Care to explain what exactly you mean by that? Green Lantern pressed on. Hawkgirl continued without flinching back at his reaction. As a Green Lantern, you should know about the intergalactic war between the Thonagarian and Gordonian empires. It's been going on for generations. Everywhere the Gordonians pass by, they leave only death and destruction in their wake. They kill everyone that opposes them and enslave and sell the ones that surrender. The Thanagarians are the only thing that stops them from taking over the entire galaxy. The reason why Earth, which is so close, at only 25 light-years away from the Vega star system, had not been invaded by the Gordonians yet, is the Thanagarian fleet holding them back. Green Lantern calmed down at her words and stood silent, listening to what she had to say. However, over the past few decades, the Gordonians' incursions have grown fiercer and their technology advanced in leaps and bounds due to the increasingly growing support of their old allies, the Scions. As of late, we started to lose ground. We predicted that the Earth would soon be faced with their invasion. Coming here, my mission was to ascertain the planet's defenses and become familiar with the natives, culture and customs in order for the Thanagarian army to more easily establish a military base here and halt the Gordonians' advance. To prevent the Earth from being destroyed. A silence that one could hear a pin drop was instilled in the conference room of the watchtower. You spoke of your mission using the past. Did something change or am I reading too much into it? The ever-perceptive Batman asked. Hawkgirl confirmed his thoughts. 2 days ago, I received a transmission from my commander. My orders have changed. I am to return to Thanagar. I did not know how to break the news to you because they were so sudden, but now it looked like the perfect opportunity. When her words finally sank in, multiple issues dawned on the others. You have to leave. Then, what about us? Green Lantern asked. Green Lantern and Hawkgirl had never spoken outright about their relationship with the rest of the Justice League, but the others were not clueless. They had long since discovered the growing affection between the two of them. They were not surprised by his question. Shara Hole made a conflicted expression and sighed. I am military. I cannot ignore the orders I have been given. You were a soldier too, John, you should know that. Martian Manhunter spoke from the side. Then what about Earth? Have the Thanagarians given up on our planet and left us to fend for ourselves? We can't possibly stop an intergalactic empire's army alone. The problem brought forth by the Martian alarmed the others too. That's not the case anymore. The mercenary caterpillar annihilated the Scion race. Furthermore, the Gordonians have still not recovered from the shock of losing their allies like that. Our intel says that over the past 3 weeks that passed since the Scion's destruction, almost 1 million Gordonians have run away from their planet, Karna, terrified at the possibility of the mercenary coming to kill them too. The number of Gordonians deserting the army is increasing on a daily basis too. Currently, the Gordonians' ranks are in disarray. The Thanagarian army has already started winning battles on multiple fronts. Without the backing of the Scions and with the Gordonians shivering in their boots in fear of Caterpillar's retribution, they can no longer hold their own against our troops. Their defeat is only a matter of time. We will finally win this war. The other 6 in the room were once more reminded of just who was the one living with them in the watchtower. Watching the easy-going attitude of the mercenary as he bantered with his fox every day, they almost forgot how the two of them had destroyed a planet and how many beings they had killed only 3 weeks ago. Hawkgirl's words reminded them how terrifying the alien mercenary and his planet-busting fox were, terrifying enough to even influence the course of a generation-long war between 2 intergalactic empires. When I came to this planet, my intention was to just keep a professional distance from everyone. After all, despite the Thanagarians' good intentions, I was still a spy. I could never be here with you forever. I knew that when the time came, both I and the people I got close to would suffer. I knew that I would have to leave you behind someday, but I could not help becoming close to you. As she spoke those words, her voice became shaky. However, she was a tough woman and she did not cry. Seeing as I will not be able to continue living on Earth due to my orders, I should not take part in deciding the Justice League's future course of events. In fact, I will be leaving for Thanagar today. I have already packed all my belongings. Saying that, she stood up from her chair and left the room. Shara. John Stewart called out and rushed out of the room after her too. Asterism. The Justice League's meeting was unexpectedly interrupted by Hawkgirl's revelations and her decision to leave the Earth right away. However, after Hawkgirl's abrupt and swift departure, the remaining 6 came back to the conference room. John, do you want us to postpone this to a later date? Superman asked in a tone of understanding. Don't mind me. Green Lantern said. Though he looked more taciturn than ever, his expression was composed. Personal matters can't come before Justice League business. As Shara said, I was a soldier too, I understand her decision. She can't disobey the orders coming from above. Superman nodded in acknowledgement and cleared his throat. Though Hawkgirl leaving us is unfortunate, there is nothing we can do about it. We have to move on and work harder in order to protect our planet. And now that we know each other's identities, it's time we discuss another very important issue, funding. Not only we will need a much bigger headquarters, which will cost us dozens of millions, but we will also need more spaceships, specialized equipment and many other facilities, enough to accommodate dozens or maybe hundreds of heroes. Batman said. As Bruce Wayne, I am a billionaire. However, I can't support all the costs by myself. Not because I can't afford it but because such a large sum of money disappearing at once without an explanation would attract too much attention and possibly expose the fact that I'm somehow connected to the Justice League. The government is most likely paying very close attention to all the wealthy people since they know that the Justice League would not be able to operate without serious financial backing. Flash said. To be honest, I don't see how much help we could be. I'm just a forensics scientist at the Central City Police Department. John is a retired soldier, Wonder Woman is an exiled princess and Martian Manhunter has no worldly possessions. We aren't poor, of course, but we are not rich either. What about Aquaman? Have you tried to contact him? He's the king of Atlantis. He's probably even wealthier than I am if we were to count all the sunken treasures at the bottom of the oceans, treasures that only he has access to. He doesn't have to justify his expenses to anyone either. Batman suggested. That's a great idea. We just have to see how we can convince him to support us. I will go talk to him myself, Superman offered. I can also provide the Justice League with highly advanced technology from Krypton and even money if it comes down to it. Over the years, I've gathered many valuable things in my fortress of solitude. As Clark Kent I may not be a millionaire but, as Superman, I could always get some rare space materials that NASA or other interested parties would be willing to spend a fortune for. I will get into contact with Green Arrow and see if he can support us as well, Batman said. The others made a confused face. They had not heard about that name until then. He's a small, local vigilante operating in Star City. I can't tell you his identity without his approval first, but I can tell you that he is just as rich as Batman. Superman explained. Martian Manhunter, who had been silent until then, spoke. I was contacted by a very wealthy man named Maxwell Lord 2 weeks ago too, only a few days after our clash against Uzumaki Naruto in Jump City. It was not long after Superman suggested to expand the Justice League. Maxwell Lord offered to support the Justice League financially but hearing the way Martian Manhunter trailed off made the others curious. But what? Is there an issue with his character? Wonder Woman asked. I do not know. Martian Manhunter said. What do you mean? Batman asked. I could not read his mind. He is a telepath, just like me. Bruce Wayne made a thinking posture. I know Maxwell Lord. He's the head of Chimtech Consortium and one of the wealthiest men in the world. A rather unscrupulous businessman, but nobody ever gets that rich by playing nice against the competition. Still, as far as I know, he has not broken any laws yet. He is not sided with the government either, he's rather infamous for often butting heads with them. Flash said. I don't find it weird that a billionaire would offer to support us. I mean, people aren't blind, they see what we have gone through to protect everyone. Darkseid attacked the Earth a few years ago. Imperium and his race almost took over the planet about a year and a half ago, and then there was the Gordonian ship threatening to destroy Jump City a few weeks ago too. Green Lantern nodded in agreement. True. If Maxwell Lord wants to support us, I say we go for it. We need all the help we can get. The six of them continued to discuss various matters related to the Justice League's future, but, at some point, the alarms of the watchtower started to blare. Flash was the first to arrive in the control room, just in time to see a live footage captured by one of the remote cameras placed on one of the many Justice League-owned satellites orbiting the Earth. A very large and muscular gray-skinned man with shaggy and long black hair and a horseshoe mustache was approaching the Earth while riding a space bike. He was dressed in leather clothes and a very thick chain was wrapped around his forearm while the other end of it was tied to a large, human-sized metallic box which he dragged after the bike, making sure to keep it right after the engines, seemingly with the clear intent of heating it up. When Superman arrived in the control room as well and saw the appearance of the alien detected by the watchtower, he frowned. Lobo. What is he doing here? To be continued.